You keep going back to what broke you because it still feels familiar. They told you pain is something you leave behind once you know it hurts. But if that were true, why do you still return to the same person, the same memory, the same place, and the same feeling that once stole your peace? Why does your heart keep walking toward the door your soul already begged you to close? Why does a wound feel safer than a new beginning? The truth is, you are not returning because it healed you. You are returning because your mind recognizes it. And sometimes what the mind recognizes, it mistakes for home. Buddhist wisdom teaches that suffering continues, not only because life hurts us, but because attachment keeps tying us to what has already hurt us. The mind clings to familiar pain because it knows how to survive there. It knows the rules of that sadness. It knows the shape of that disappointment. It knows how to wait, how to hope, how to explain, how to forgive too quickly, how to call chaos love, how to call longing destiny, and how to call repeated pain a lesson. But what if the thing you keep calling love is only your wounded mind returning to what it understands? Tonight, as you listen, something inside you will begin to see clearly. The old pattern will start to lose its disguise. The memory you kept romanticizing will begin to show its real face. The attachment you thought was loyalty will begin to feel like a chain, and the part of you that kept going back will finally understand that peace may feel strange at first, not because it is wrong, but because you have spent too long living inside emotional storms. This is not just a lesson about walking away. This is about waking up from the habit of choosing familiar suffering over unknown freedom. This is about learning to leave without hatred, without drama, without regret, and without needing the past to bless your future. Are you ready? Let us begin. And before we go deeper, hold this one truth gently. You do not keep returning because you love pain. You keep returning because something inside you has learned to recognize pain faster than peace. The old wound has a voice. It whispers, "At least you know me." And because the unknown can feel frightening, the heart sometimes runs back to the very place that taught it to be afraid. There is a strange sadness in realizing that what broke you can still feel like home. Not because it was kind, not because it was safe, not because it loved you well, but because your mind learned its rooms, its silence, its disappointments, its waiting, its sudden warmth, and its familiar coldness. And when you have lived too long inside a pattern, even suffering can begin to feel like a place you know how to survive. This is where the wounded mind becomes confused. It does not always choose what is good for you. Sometimes it chooses what is known. It chooses what has already happened before, because the known gives it a false sense of control. The mind says, "I have been here before. I know how this pain works. I know when to hold my breath. I know when to expect distance. I know when to blame myself. I know when to apologize, even when I did nothing wrong. I know when the storm is coming." And because it knows the pattern, it calls the pattern safety. But Buddhist wisdom invites you to see deeper than the surface. It teaches that suffering is not only the pain that arrives, it is also the attachment that keeps you tied to it after it has already shown you what it is. The Buddha spoke often about craving, clinging, and ignorance. Not ignorance as stupidity, but ignorance as not seeing clearly. And when the heart is wounded, clarity becomes difficult. You can look directly at the thing hurting you and still tell yourself, maybe this time it will be different. You can feel your peace leaving your body and still convince yourself, maybe I am overreacting. You can see the same pattern repeat and still whisper, maybe I just need to be more patient. This is how familiar pain disguises itself as safety. It does not come wearing a warning sign. It comes wearing the face of someone you miss. It comes as an old message you reread. It comes as a memory that only shows you the soft parts and hides the damage. It comes as the feeling that you are close to getting what you always wanted, if only you stay a little longer. And because the wounded mind is hungry for relief, it mistakes the smallest crumb of comfort for a full meal. When someone has lived through emotional disappointment, rejection, abandonment, or repeated confusion, the mind starts building survival maps. It marks where danger came from. It remembers tone, silence, distance, affection, withdrawal, apology, and promise. But here is the painful part. If danger happened often enough, the mind may begin to treat that danger as normal. Not because it enjoys it, but because it has adjusted itself around it. Like a person who has lived beside loud traffic for years and no longer hears the noise, the wounded mind can begin to live beside emotional pain and call it life. Peace, on the other hand, can feel suspicious. A quiet love can feel boring. A stable friendship can feel unfamiliar. A gentle person can feel too easy. A calm environment can feel empty. Not because it lacks value, but because your nervous system has been trained to expect tension. When you are used to earning affection through anxiety, real kindness may feel confusing. When you are used to being ignored, steady attention may feel strange. When you are used to chasing, being met halfway may feel almost unbelievable. So the mind says, something is missing. But what is missing may not be love. What is missing may be the old fear. This is why many people return to what hurt them, even after they understand the harm. Understanding alone does not always free the heart. You can know a fire burns and still feel drawn to its warmth. You can know a person is not good for your peace and still miss the way they once made you feel chosen. You can know the past cannot hold your future and still keep searching through it for a different ending. The wounded mind does not heal simply because it receives information. It heals when it begins to feel safe without the old pattern. And that takes patience. Buddhist practice does not ask you to hate the part of you that went back. It asks you to observe it, to sit with it, to look at it with honesty instead of shame. Because shame only creates another wound. Shame says, "Why are you so weak?" Wisdom says, "What pain taught you to confuse this with safety?" Shame says, "You should have known better." Wisdom says, "You survived the best way you knew how, but now you can learn another way." This difference matters because healing cannot grow in the same soil as self-hatred. Think of the wounded mind like a child who grew up in a house where the lights always flickered. The child may grow used to darkness. Later, when placed in a bright room, the brightness may feel too strong. The child may even cover their eyes and ask to return to the dim room, not because dimness is better, but because brightness feels unfamiliar. In the same way, someone who has lived in emotional uncertainty may run from certainty. Someone who has lived in unstable affection may distrust consistency. Someone who has been taught to beg for love may not recognize love when it arrives without a fight. This is why familiar pain can feel safer than unfamiliar peace. It gives the mind a role. It gives the heart a script. You know who to be inside that suffering. You know how to wait. You know how to excuse. You know how to read signs. You know how to shrink yourself. You know how to hope without receiving. You know how to turn small kindness into proof. You know how to carry the disappointment quietly and still show up. But when peace arrives, it asks you to become someone new. It asks you to stop performing for love. It asks you to stop confusing anxiety with passion. It asks you to stop treating inconsistency like mystery. It asks you to rest. And for a wounded mind, rest can feel like losing control. The ego also plays a quiet role here. The ego does not only want pride. Sometimes the ego wants the old story to finally make sense. It wants the person who hurt you to become the person who heals you. It wants the place that rejected you to become the place that chooses you. It wants the same door that closed on you to open again, not because that door is good for you, but because your ego wants proof that you were worth opening for. So you return, not always to love, but to repair the humiliation of being unwanted, unseen, or misunderstood. This is a deep trap, because the mind can begin to believe that healing means getting a different response from the same source of pain. It says, if they finally apologize, I will be free. If they finally choose me, I will be enough. If they finally understand what they did, I will stop hurting. But Buddhist wisdom would gently ask, why must your freedom depend on the awakening of someone else? Why must your peace wait at the doorstep of a person who has already shown you they may not know how to care for it? This does not mean people cannot change. It does not mean forgiveness is impossible. It does not mean every painful bond must be hated forever. Buddhism does not teach bitterness. It teaches clear seeing. And clear seeing means you stop letting hope blind you to reality. You stop using one good memory to cover 10 painful truths. You stop making excuses for what repeatedly empties you. You stop calling your attachment compassion when, deep down, you are afraid of the silence that comes after leaving. The wounded mind mistakes familiar pain for safety because familiarity gives it a false promise. You will not be surprised here, but this is not true safety. It is only recognized harm. Real safety does not require you to abandon yourself. Real safety does not make you rehearse conversations in your head all night. Real safety does not make you feel afraid to speak honestly. Real safety does not ask you to become smaller so someone else can remain comfortable. Real safety does not keep your body tense and call it love. Real safety brings your spirit back to itself. One reason this confusion becomes so strong is because the body remembers what the mind tries to explain away. You may tell yourself, it was not that bad, but your body tightens when their name appears. You may say, I am fine, but your stomach turns when you hear their voice. You may say, I have moved on, but your sleep changes when an old memory returns. The body carries a quiet honesty. It does not always use words, but it speaks through tension, heaviness, tiredness, restlessness, and the strange feeling of being pulled towards something that also drains you. Buddhist mindfulness helps because it teaches you to notice without immediately obeying. A feeling can arise, but you do not have to follow it. A memory can appear, but you do not have to build a home inside it. A craving can speak, but you do not have to treat it as wisdom. This is one of the most powerful shifts a person can make. Instead of saying, I miss them, so I must return, you learn to say, missing is present. Instead of saying, I feel lonely, so I should reopen the door, you learn to say, loneliness is moving through me. Instead of saying, this pain feels familiar, so maybe it means something, you learn to say, familiarity is not the same as truth. That one sentence can change a life. Familiarity is not the same as truth. Because not everything familiar is meant to stay. Some things are familiar because you repeated them before you knew your worth. Some things are familiar because you had no better model at the time. Some things are familiar because your younger self learned to survive inside them. Some things are familiar because they were never healed, only memorized. And when something has been memorized deeply enough, it can feel like destiny. But destiny does not keep breaking your peace. Destiny does not require you to abandon your dignity. Destiny does not make you confuse longing with love. There is also grief hidden inside this pattern. People often think leaving familiar pain only means leaving a person or a situation. But sometimes it means leaving an identity. You may have become used to being the one who waits, the one who understands, the one who gives another chance, the one who carries the relationship, the one who proves love through suffering, the one who stays even when staying hurts. And when you begin to heal, you may not only lose the old attachment, you may lose the version of yourself who knew how to live there. That can feel frightening, because who are you when you are no longer begging? Who are you when you are no longer chasing? Who are you when your day is not controlled by whether someone replies, notices, apologizes, returns, or changes? Who are you when your peace is no longer tied to the behavior of another person? At first, this freedom can feel like emptiness, but it is not emptiness, it is space. And space feels strange when you have spent years being crowded by pain. Buddhist wisdom often speaks of impermanence. Everything changes. Feelings change. People change. Seasons change. Bodies change. Thoughts change. Even the pain you think you cannot live without is changing. But attachment tries to freeze life. It says, "This person must become who I needed them to be." It says, "This story must end the way I imagined." It says, "This pain must be justified." It says, "I cannot leave until I understand everything." But life does not always give clean endings. Sometimes the ending is simply the moment you stop offering your spirit to a place that no longer nourishes it. The wounded mind struggles with this because it wants certainty before it leaves. It wants proof that leaving is right. It wants a final sign. It wants the other person to become cruel enough that walking away feels easy, or kind enough that staying finally feels safe. But most painful attachments live in the middle, not completely terrible, not truly peaceful, not fully absent, not fully present, just enough sweetness to keep you hoping, and just enough pain to keep you wounded. This middle place is where the mind becomes trapped. And because it is trapped, it starts negotiating with suffering. It says, maybe if I change my tone, maybe if I become more patient, maybe if I ask differently, maybe if I love harder, maybe if I need less, maybe if I wait longer. This is how the wounded mind turns survival into self-abandonment. It keeps adjusting itself around someone else's inability to meet it. It keeps treating the wound like a puzzle, believing that if it finds the right piece, the pain will become love. But not every wound is a puzzle. Some wounds are messages. Some wounds say, "You are not safe here." Some wounds say, "You have outgrown this." Some wounds say, "This is not where your peace lives." Some wounds say, "Stop returning to the place that taught you to doubt your own spirit." And when you ignore the message, the wound repeats itself. Not to punish you, but to wake you. This is why Buddhist wisdom does not only ask, "What happened to you?" It asks, "What are you still clinging to?" This question can feel uncomfortable because it brings responsibility back into your hands, not blame. Responsibility. Blame says, "It is your fault." Responsibility says, "Your freedom is now in your care." There is a world of difference between those two. You may not have chosen the first wound. You may not have chosen the person who harmed your peace. You may not have chosen the pattern that shaped your heart. But once you begin to see clearly, you can choose not to keep feeding what keeps hurting you. That choice is not always dramatic. It may begin quietly. You do not send the message. You do not reread the old conversation. You do not explain yourself again to someone committed to misunderstanding you. You do not walk back into a room where your peace always leaves before you do. You do not confuse a moment of loneliness with a command to return. You breathe. You feel the pull. You let it rise. You let it burn. You let it pass. And each time you do not obey the old craving, something inside you grows stronger. This is the discipline of healing. Not the loud kind, not the kind that needs to announce itself to everyone, but the private discipline of choosing peace when your pain is asking for familiarity. The private discipline of saying, "I know this road, but I do not have to walk it again." The private discipline of letting the old door remain closed, even when memory makes it look beautiful. The private discipline of admitting, "I miss it, but I do not miss who I became inside it." That last truth is important. Sometimes you do not miss the person, you miss the hope. You miss the version of the story you created. You miss the feeling of possibility. You miss the beginning before the pattern revealed itself. You miss the dream, not the reality. And because the dream was beautiful, you keep trying to return to the place where you first felt it. But the place where a dream began is not always the place where your healing begins. Sometimes healing begins when you accept that the dream was real to you, but the reality was still harming you. Buddhism teaches compassion, but compassion must include yourself. Many people use compassion as a rope to tie themselves back to suffering. They say, but they had a hard life. But they did not mean it. But they are wounded too. But maybe they need me. Yes, they may be wounded. Yes, their pain may explain some things, but another person's wound does not give them the right to keep reopening yours. Compassion without wisdom becomes self-neglect. True compassion sees the suffering of others without volunteering to be destroyed by it. This is where safety must be redefined. Safety is not what feels familiar. Safety is what allows you to breathe. Safety is what allows you to be honest without fear. Safety is what allows your mind to rest. Safety is what allows your body to soften. Safety is what does not require constant guessing. Safety is where your dignity is not treated like a small thing. Safety is where love does not feel like a test you keep failing. The wounded mind may not trust this immediately. It may still crave the old pattern. It may still look back. It may still wonder. It may still ask, what if I made a mistake? That is normal. Healing does not erase memory in one night. But each time you choose clarity over craving, the mind learns a new path. Each time you stay present instead of returning, the body learns a new safety. Each time you stop calling pain home, your spirit begins to remember that it was made for more than survival. And maybe this is the deepest Buddhist lesson here. You are not your wound. You are not the pattern that formed around your wound. You are not the craving that pulls you backward. You are not the fear that says peace will leave you empty. You are the awareness that can see all of it. You are the one who can notice the pull and choose not to follow. You are the one who can feel the ache and still remain free. You are the one who can bow to the past without moving back into it. So when the old pain calls your name, pause. Do not answer too quickly. When the familiar door opens in your mind, do not rush through it. When the memory returns dressed as love, look again. Ask yourself, does this bring me peace, or does it only bring me what I already know? Ask yourself, am I choosing this because it is good for me, or because I understand how to suffer here? Ask yourself, is this safety, or is this just a wound I have learned to survive? The answer may hurt at first, but it will not harm you. Truth can sting, but illusion keeps you trapped. And once you see that familiar pain was never safety, something begins to loosen. The chain becomes visible. The pattern loses some of its power. The old home begins to look less like shelter and more like a place you survived. And that is when leaving becomes possible, not because you are angry, not because you hate the past, not because you have no feelings left, but because you finally understand that what feels familiar is not always what is meant for you. You do not have to keep proving your strength by returning to what broke you. You do not have to keep calling endurance love. You do not have to keep mistaking the ache in your chest for destiny. You can miss something and still not return. You can love someone and still choose distance. You can honor what you survived without rebuilding your life around it. You can feel the old pull and still walk toward peace. And yes, at first, peace may feel unfamiliar. It may feel quiet. It may feel too simple. It may feel like nothing is happening. But do not run from that silence. That silence is where your nervous system begins to rest. That quiet is where your wisdom starts speaking again. That space is where your soul remembers its own shape. You are not lost because you no longer live in chaos. You are not empty because you are no longer chasing pain. You are not weak because you finally want gentleness. You are waking up. So let the wounded mind learn slowly. Let it grieve what it once called home. Let it cry without turning back. Let it shake without obeying fear. Let it miss the pattern without making the pattern sacred. Let it understand that survival is not the same as safety, and familiarity is not the same as love. The past may still know your name, but that does not mean you must answer. The wound may still remember you, but that does not mean you belong to it. This is how the path begins, not with a loud announcement, but with one quiet refusal, one breath, one pause, one moment where you feel the pull and choose yourself anyway. And from that moment, the mind begins to learn a new truth. Safety is not the pain you recognize. Safety is the peace you are finally brave enough to receive. And once the mind begins to understand that safety is not the pain it recognizes, another truth rises quietly from beneath it. There is comfort hidden inside old suffering. Not because the suffering was good, not because the wound was loving, and not because the past deserves to keep you, but because the heart can become strangely loyal to what it has repeated for too long. When pain has been visited often enough, it stops feeling like an enemy at the door and starts feeling like a room you already know how to enter. There is a kind of comfort no one likes to admit. It is the comfort of knowing exactly how something will hurt, the comfort of knowing where the disappointment will come from, the comfort of knowing how the silence will feel, how the waiting will begin, how the apology may sound, how the hope will rise again, and how your peace will slowly disappear. It is painful, yes, but it is not surprising. And sometimes the wounded heart chooses a familiar ache over a peaceful road it does not yet trust. This is one of the quietest traps of attachment. What once destroyed your peace can later become the thing you run to when life feels uncertain. It sounds strange until you look closely. When you are tired, lonely, confused, or emotionally exposed, the mind does not always search for what is wise. It searches for what is available, known, and emotionally familiar. It reaches for the old person, the old habit, the old memory, the old conversation, the old place where you once lost yourself, because even destruction can feel comforting when your mind has memorized its pattern. Buddhist wisdom teaches that craving is not always a loud desire. Sometimes craving is a quiet leaning toward what keeps you bound. It is not always, "I want this because it is good for me." Sometimes it is, "I want this because I do not know who I am without it." This is why the heart can return to what took away its peace. It is not simply chasing pleasure, it is chasing recognition. It is chasing the feeling of being in a story it already understands. The hidden comfort is not in the pain itself, it is in the role you learned to play inside that pain. Maybe you became the patient one, maybe you became the forgiving one, maybe you became the one who waits, explains, understands, rescues, tolerates, or hopes. Maybe you became the person who could turn small kindness into proof of love. Maybe you became the one who kept saying, "They are not always like this," even though your spirit was tired from defending what kept hurting you. That role may have cost you peace, but it also gave you a kind of identity, and the mind can cling to identity even when identity is built around suffering. This is why leaving can feel harder than staying. Staying keeps you in a known role. Leaving asks you to meet a version of yourself you have not practiced being. Staying allows you to keep using the same explanations. Leaving asks you to stop explaining and start accepting. Staying lets you keep hoping that the past will finally become gentle. Leaving asks you to grieve the truth that it may never become what you needed. Staying keeps the story alive. Leaving asks you to live without the story. And that can feel like losing more than a person. It can feel like losing a whole world. A person may return to what destroyed their peace because that pain holds unfinished emotions. There may be words never spoken, apologies never received, questions never answered, promises never fulfilled, and memories that still feel warm enough to confuse the heart. The mind keeps going back because it believes something is waiting there. Closure, justice, a better ending, a softer explanation, a version of the person who finally understands. But often, what waits there is not closure. It is the same wound wearing a different mood. This is where suffering becomes clever. It does not always look like suffering when it returns. Sometimes it arrives as nostalgia. It tells you, remember the good times. Sometimes it arrives as pity. It tells you, they are struggling too. Sometimes it arrives as hope. It tells you, maybe they have changed. Sometimes it arrives as loneliness. It tells you, at least they know you. Sometimes it arrives as guilt. It tells you, you are being too harsh. And sometimes it arrives as spiritual confusion. It tells you, a good person should forgive and go back. But Buddhist wisdom does not teach blind return. It teaches awareness. It teaches compassion with clear eyes. Forgiveness does not mean walking back into the same fire. Compassion does not mean handing your peace back to the person or pattern that did not know how to protect it. Letting go does not mean you are cruel. It means you finally understand that your suffering is not made holy just because you endured it. The hidden comfort of returning is often found in the illusion of control. When you go back to a familiar wound, you may feel for a moment that you are no longer floating in the unknown. You know the emotional weather there. You know how to prepare your face. You know how much to say and how much to hide. You know when to expect warmth and when to expect withdrawal. You know how to read the signs, even if reading them exhausts you. This gives the mind a false confidence. It says, I can handle this. But handling pain is not the same as being safe from it. Many people mistake endurance for strength. They think, if I can survive this, then maybe it is not destroying me. But survival is not the same as peace. You can survive a room that slowly drains your spirit. You can survive being ignored, dismissed, confused, used, or emotionally starved. You can survive years of waiting for someone to become kind. But the question is not only, can I survive this? The deeper question is, what is surviving this turning me into? Because familiar pain does not only hurt while it is happening, it shapes how you see yourself. It teaches you to expect less. It teaches you to doubt your needs. It teaches you to become grateful for crumbs. It teaches you to apologize for your own hunger. It teaches you to see calmness as suspicious and confusion as connection. It slowly trains your heart to believe that love must be chased, earned, decoded, or suffered for. And once the heart accepts this, peace can start feeling undeserved. That is why returning can feel comforting even when it destroys you. It confirms the old belief. It says, yes, this is what love feels like. This is what you deserve. This is where you belong. The wounded mind may not say these words openly, but it behaves as if they are true. It keeps reaching for the situation that matches its deepest wound. If you were abandoned, you may feel drawn to people who keep you waiting. If you were unseen, you may chase those who make you prove your worth. If you were blamed unfairly, you may return to relationships where you must constantly defend your heart. The wound looks for a familiar stage, and the mind calls it attraction. This is not your fault, but it is your responsibility to see it. Buddhist wisdom often begins with seeing things as they are, not as craving wants them to be. This is difficult because craving is a storyteller. It edits the past. It softens the sharp edges. It remembers the laugh but forgets the nights of anxiety. It remembers the apology but forgets the repeated behavior. It remembers the touch but forgets the tension. It remembers the promise but forgets how many times that promise became another wound. Craving does not show you the full picture. It shows you the part that keeps you attached. And when you are lonely, craving becomes even more persuasive. Loneliness can make the past look warmer than it was. It can make a person who hurt you seem like the only person who ever understood you. It can make an old pattern feel like shelter just because the present feels empty. But loneliness is not always a sign that you should return. Sometimes loneliness is the space left behind after you stop abandoning yourself. It is uncomfortable, but it is not dangerous. It is the mind adjusting to freedom. The problem is, freedom can feel quiet after chaos. If your peace was destroyed for a long time, your body may not know what to do when nothing is wrong. You may start searching for a problem. You may check your phone, revisit old memories, look for signs, or create emotional noise because silence feels unfamiliar. This is why people return to old suffering after they finally get distance from it. They do not always return because the past became better. They return because peace feels too still, and the nervous system mistakes stillness for emptiness. But stillness is not emptiness. Stillness is where healing begins. The hidden comfort of returning also lives in the fear of finality. As long as you keep going back, the story is not fully over. There is still another chance, another conversation, another possibility, another reason to believe that the wound may change its meaning. But when you stop returning, you must face the grief of ending. You must face the truth that some things will not be repaired in the way you hoped. You must accept that the person who hurt you may never fully understand the damage. You must accept that the past may remain unfinished. And for many people, an unfinished story feels unbearable. So they reopen the door just to avoid feeling the ending. This is one of the hardest things to admit. Sometimes we return not because the relationship is alive, but because we are afraid to bury it. We keep touching the ashes to prove there was once a fire. We keep replaying the memory to prove it mattered. We keep reaching for the person to prove we were not foolish for loving them. But love does not become meaningless because it ended. Your care was real, even if the situation was unhealthy. Your hope was real, even if the outcome disappointed you. Your softness was real, even if someone did not know how to honor it. You do not have to keep returning to prove that what you felt was real. This is where Buddhist wisdom offers a different kind of freedom. It teaches that you can honor what was without clinging to it. You can bow to the lesson without living inside the wound. You can admit that something mattered and still accept that it is no longer a place for your spirit. This is not coldness. This is maturity. This is the point where compassion stops being a chain and becomes a light. The hidden comfort of returning may also be the comfort of avoiding yourself. When you are focused on someone who hurt you, you do not have to sit with your own emptiness. You do not have to ask why you accepted so little. You do not have to face the old wound that made the pattern feel normal. You do not have to rebuild your life. You do not have to learn stillness. You do not have to discover who you are without the chase. The painful attachment becomes a distraction from the deeper healing that is waiting underneath. That is why letting go can feel like losing your distraction. Suddenly, there is no one to analyze, no message to decode, no mood to measure, no apology to wait for, no proof to gather, no emotional puzzle to solve. Just you, your breath, your body, your memories, your unmet needs, and the quiet truth that you must now come home to yourself. This can feel uncomfortable at first because the mind is used to looking outward for relief. But the Buddhist path gently turns you inward, not as punishment, but as liberation. Because the peace you keep seeking from the source of your pain cannot be found there. If a place keeps burning your hands, it cannot also be the place where your hands learn to rest. If a person keeps making you doubt your worth, they cannot be the one who gives your worth back to you. If a pattern keeps pulling you away from your center, it cannot guide you home. The mind may argue with this, but the body usually already knows. The body knows when peace has been destroyed. It remembers the tight chest, the tired eyes, the heavy mornings, the sudden fear, the overthinking, the careful wording, the waiting for small signs of care. It remembers how your joy became smaller. It remembers how your attention became trapped. It remembers how your heart kept preparing for disappointment even during the good moments. And yet, when the old comfort calls, the mind may still say, maybe one more time. This is why mindfulness is necessary. Without mindfulness, craving feels like truth. With mindfulness, craving becomes something you can observe. You can notice the urge to return without becoming the urge. You can feel the loneliness without turning it into a message. You can miss someone without making missing a command. You can remember the good without erasing the harm. You can say, this is desire passing through me. This is not wisdom. This is not destiny. This is not proof that I should go back. That pause is powerful. In that pause, karma begins to change. Karma is often misunderstood as punishment, but in Buddhist thought, it is deeply connected to action and consequence. The actions you repeat become the path you walk. If you keep returning to what destroys your peace, that return becomes a groove in the mind. It becomes easier each time. The mind learns, this is where we go when we feel lonely. This is where we go when we feel unsure. This is where we go when we need comfort. But when you pause, breathe, and choose not to return, you create a new action, a new path, a new possibility. At first, it may feel small, but small actions repeated with awareness become liberation. This is how you begin to break the hidden comfort of suffering, not by forcing yourself to feel nothing, not by pretending you are above pain, not by hating the person, memory, or situation, but by seeing clearly what returning actually costs you. It costs you the peace you fought to rebuild. It costs you the self-trust you were beginning to grow. It costs you the dignity of honoring your own truth. It costs you the quiet progress no one else can see. It costs you the chance to meet life without dragging the old wound into every new doorway. And the cost matters. Sometimes the heart says, but I miss them. And wisdom answers, missing is not a map. Sometimes the heart says, but I still care. And wisdom answers, care does not require return. Sometimes the heart says, but they were not always bad. And wisdom answers, something does not have to be all bad to still be wrong for your peace. Sometimes the heart says, but what if this time is different? And wisdom answers, different words do not matter if the pattern remains the same. This is not harsh. This is clear. The hidden comfort of returning loses power when you stop confusing emotional intensity with meaning. Some people think that because a bond feels deep, it must be sacred. But depth is not always health. A wound can be deep too. A pattern can be intense because it touches your fear, your longing, your childhood, your insecurity, your desire to be chosen, your hunger to finally be enough. Intensity can feel spiritual when it is actually nervous system activation. It can feel like destiny when it is really repetition. It can feel like love when it is your old pain recognizing itself in another person. Peace may not give you the same rush. It may not keep you checking your phone every few minutes. It may not make your stomach twist. It may not make you feel high one day and empty the next. But peace gives you something more sacred than intensity. It gives you room to breathe. It gives you consistency. It gives you emotional safety. It gives you the ability to be yourself without performing for affection. It gives your mind back to you. And if you have lived for a long time without that, you may not recognize it immediately. You may even feel bored. But sometimes boredom is just the absence of chaos. Sometimes calm feels plain because your body is detoxing from emotional storms. Sometimes safe love feels unfamiliar because you have mistaken unpredictability for passion. So do not run too quickly from what feels peaceful. Learn to sit with it. Learn to let your body adjust to gentleness. Learn to trust the quiet. The return to old pain often happens at weak moments, late at night, after disappointment, after rejection, during stress, when you feel unseen, when your life feels uncertain. The mind reaches backward because backward has emotional landmarks. This is why healing requires preparation. You must know your vulnerable moments. You must know when the old comfort becomes tempting. You must know which emotions make you want to reopen the door. Is it loneliness, shame, fear, desire, boredom, guilt, the need to feel chosen? Once you can name the emotional doorway, you can stop walking through it blindly. Buddhist awareness is not about judging yourself. It is about seeing the chain before it tightens. Feeling arises. Thought follows. Craving speaks. Memory appears. The body reacts. The hand reaches for the phone. The mind prepares an excuse. The old path opens. But somewhere in that chain, awareness can enter. You can breathe and say, I know this road. That simple recognition creates space, and in that space, freedom becomes possible. You may still feel the pull. Do not make the pull your enemy. The pull is only old conditioning. It is the echo of what you practiced before you knew peace was possible. You can treat it gently without obeying it. You can say, I hear you, but we are not going back there. You can comfort yourself without reopening the wound. You can miss the past without surrendering your future to it. This is one of the most compassionate things you can do for yourself. To stop asking the broken place to become your shelter. The place that destroyed your peace may have moments of warmth, beauty, or tenderness, but if it repeatedly brings you back to anxiety, shrinking, confusion, or self-betrayal, then the warmth is not enough. A small candle inside a burning house does not make the house safe. A kind word inside a harmful pattern does not make the pattern healthy. A beautiful memory inside a painful bond does not make the bond worth losing yourself over. The mind may resist this because it wants the comfort without the cost. It wants the good memory without the old wound. It wants the closeness without the confusion. It wants the beginning without the ending. But real life does not let us separate a pattern so easily. If you return to the place, you often return to the whole pattern. Not only the sweetness, but the waiting. Not only the apology, but the repetition. Not only the warmth, but the coldness that follows. Not only the memory, but the wound that memory keeps covering. This is why clear seeing must become stronger than selective remembering. The Buddhist path asks you to stop being hypnotized by fragments. Do not judge a situation only by its best moment. Look at the whole movement. How does it begin? How does it repeat? What does it awaken in you? What does it take from you? How do you feel after the comfort fades? Are you more peaceful or more attached? Are you more whole or more afraid? Are you returning to yourself or abandoning yourself again? These questions are not easy, but they are freeing. Because once you see the full pattern, the hidden comfort becomes less convincing. You begin to realize that you were not returning to peace. You were returning to relief, and relief is different from healing. Relief is the temporary ease you feel when the craving is fed. Healing is the deeper freedom that comes when the craving no longer controls you. Relief says, go back, and the ache will quiet down for a while. Healing says, stay with the ache, and it will teach you how to be free. At first, healing feels harder because it does not offer instant comfort. It asks you to sit with the urge. It asks you to feel the grief. It asks you to let the story end without forcing it to make sense. It asks you to stop negotiating with what already showed you its nature. But over time, healing gives you something returning never could: self-respect. The quiet pride of knowing you did not betray yourself again. The calm strength of knowing you protected your peace when no one was watching. The deep relief of waking up and realizing your life is no longer tied to the mood of what once broke you. That kind of peace is not dramatic, but it is powerful. One day, the thing that once pulled you back will still appear in memory, but it will not own you. You may remember the place, the person, the feeling, the old version of yourself who wanted so badly for it to become safe. And instead of running back, you will feel compassion. You will understand why you stayed. You will understand why you hoped. You will understand why leaving took time. But you will also understand why you cannot return. That is when the hidden comfort loses its disguise. You see it for what it was. Not love, not destiny, not safety, but the mind reaching for what it knew because it had not yet learned how to trust peace. And once you see that, you do not need to hate the past. You simply stop letting it guide you. You can bless the lesson and still close the door. You can care from a distance. You can forgive without re-entering. You can miss without moving backward. You can feel tenderness for what once was and still choose what now protects your spirit. You can stop turning your wound into a home. The path forward may feel unfamiliar, but unfamiliar does not mean unsafe. It only means new. It means your mind is learning another way to live. It means your heart is beginning to prefer peace over pattern. It means your body is slowly discovering that calm is not a warning sign. It means the old comfort is losing its authority. And when the urge to return rises again, because sometimes it will, meet it with awareness. Do not panic. Do not shame yourself. Do not say, "I have failed." Say, "This is the old comfort calling." Say, "This is the part of me that once survived by going back." Say, "I can give myself comfort without returning to destruction." Then breathe, stay, let the wave move through you. Every wave you survive without obeying becomes proof that you are stronger than the pattern. This is how peace is rebuilt, not all at once, but through quiet choices. One honest pause, one unanswered craving, one door left closed, one night where you choose rest instead of reopening the wound, one morning where you wake up with a little more of yourself still intact. And slowly, the comfort you once found in suffering begins to move. It leaves the old place and returns to your own body, your own breath, your own life, your own center. That is the beginning of true freedom. Not when the past disappears, but when it no longer feels like shelter. Not when you forget what happened, but when you stop needing to repeat it. Not when you become hard, but when you become clear. The thing that destroyed your peace may still know how to call you, but you no longer have to answer as the same person. You are allowed to outgrow what once felt familiar. You are allowed to stop choosing the pain you know. You are allowed to let peace feel strange until it becomes your new home. And one day, what once felt like comfort will feel like a cage you are grateful you no longer live inside. And when what once felt like comfort finally begins to look like a cage, the next question becomes even deeper. Why does a part of you still try to protect that cage? Why does the mind defend what drained it? Why does the heart make excuses for what wounded it? Why do you sometimes feel afraid to let go of the very suffering you prayed to escape? This is where the ego enters quietly, not as an enemy, but as an old guard standing at the gate of pain, trying to protect a life you no longer want to live. There is something heartbreaking about realizing that the ego can become loyal to your suffering, not because it loves your pain, but because it knows how to survive there. It knows the old rules. It knows the old identity. It knows the old explanations. It knows how to stand inside disappointment and still pretend everything is under control. And when healing begins to call you into a wider life, the ego may whisper, "Be careful. At least here, we know who we are." The ego is not always loud pride. Sometimes the ego is fear wearing the mask of wisdom. It tells you not to change too quickly. It tells you not to trust peace. It tells you not to release the old story because the old story gave you a name, a role, and a reason for your pain. It tells you this is just who you are now. But Buddhist wisdom teaches that the self you protect so fiercely is often a collection of memories, habits, wounds, labels, and repeated thoughts. It feels solid, but it is always changing. It feels permanent, but it is made of passing conditions. This is why the ego becomes frightened by healing. Healing threatens the identity that suffering helped create. If you have spent years seeing yourself as the one who was abandoned, betrayed, misunderstood, rejected, ignored, or never chosen, then peace does not only remove pain, peace also removes the role you learned to play around that pain. And this can feel strange because even a painful identity can feel safer than not knowing who you are becoming. The ego says, "I know how to be the wounded one." It knows how to explain your sadness. It knows how to tell the story. It knows how to protect itself with suspicion. It knows how to expect disappointment before it arrives. It knows how to push people away before they can leave. It knows how to keep score, remember every injury, and build a wall around the heart. These habits may not make you happy, but they make the ego feel prepared. And to the ego, being prepared can feel more important than being free. But preparation built from pain can become a prison. You may think you are protecting yourself when you are actually protecting the wound. You may think you are being careful when you are really obeying an old fear. You may think you are being realistic when you are only repeating the voice of what once hurt you. This is how the ego keeps suffering alive. It convinces you that the old wound is not only something that happened to you, but something you must keep carrying to remain safe. The ego loves familiar suffering because it already knows the script. In old pain, it knows when to feel angry. It knows when to feel sorry for itself. It knows when to blame, when to defend, when to shut down, when to expect rejection, when to say, "This always happens to me." There is a strange order in repeated suffering. It may hurt, but it does not require the ego to grow. Growth asks for surrender. Growth asks for humility. Growth asks you to admit that the identity you built around your wound may not be your final truth. And the ego does not like surrender. Buddhist wisdom often speaks of non-attachment, but non-attachment is not coldness. It is the ability to stop clinging to what is passing. This includes clinging to pain. Many people understand attachment to pleasure, love, money, praise, and success. But fewer people notice attachment to sadness, anger, disappointment, and victimhood. The ego can cling to suffering because suffering gives it a center. It says, "This is why I am the way I am. This is why I cannot trust. This is why I cannot soften. This is why I must stay guarded. This is why I keep going back." And because the explanation feels true, the ego protects it. But a wound can explain you without owning you. What happened may have shaped you, but it does not have to become your entire identity. The ego struggles with this because it fears that releasing the pain means denying the pain. It thinks, if I let go, does that mean what happened did not matter? If I stop carrying this, does that mean they got away with it? If I heal, does that mean I was never hurt? This is one of the deepest misunderstandings of healing. Letting go does not erase the wound. It stops the wound from becoming your master. You can validate your pain without worshipping it. You can honor what you survived without building a temple around it. You can remember what happened without making memory your home. But the ego often confuses healing with losing evidence. It wants to keep the suffering close like proof. Proof that you were wronged. Proof that you cared. Proof that you were loyal. Proof that your pain was real. So it keeps reopening the file, rereading the past, repeating the story, and guarding the wound as if the wound is the only witness left. This is why some people feel uneasy when life becomes peaceful. Without the old pain, what will they talk about inside themselves? Without the familiar suffering, what will their mind return to late at night? Without the story of who hurt them, who are they now? These questions are not small. They touch the foundation of identity. And when identity is built around injury, freedom can feel like falling through empty air. The ego would rather suffer in a known shape than expand into unknown peace. This is why the ego may sabotage healing at the exact moment peace becomes possible. You may start to feel lighter, then suddenly look for the old memory. You may finally stop checking on someone, then feel an urge to know what they are doing. You may spend a few calm days, then start questioning whether you made the wrong choice. You may meet gentleness, then compare it to the intense pain of the past and think something is missing. But what is missing is not truth. What is missing is the old drama the ego used to recognize as meaning. The ego does not always trust quiet transformation. It prefers loud evidence. It wants big emotional signs. It wants intense feelings. It wants certainty. It wants control. Buddhist wisdom, however, teaches that life is fluid, uncertain, and constantly changing. Peace grows through awareness, not through control. But the ego fears awareness because awareness sees through its tricks. Awareness notices when pride is pretending to be self-respect. It notices when fear is pretending to be intuition. It notices when attachment is pretending to be love. It notices when old suffering is pretending to be protection. The ego protects old suffering by giving it noble names. It calls resentment standards. It calls emotional walls strength. It calls distrust wisdom. It calls overthinking being careful. It calls returning to pain following the heart. It calls self-abandonment loyalty. It calls refusing to move on deep love. And because these names sound meaningful, you may not question them. But a beautiful name does not make a painful pattern sacred. A cage called devotion is still a cage. A wound called destiny is still a wound. A fear called wisdom is still fear. This is why clear seeing is so important. In Buddhist practice, suffering begins to loosen when you stop believing every thought that appears. The ego speaks through thought. It says, you cannot live without them. It says, you will never find better. It says, you are safer with what you already know. It says, if you let go, you lose. But mindfulness teaches you to hear these thoughts without becoming them. A thought can be loud and still be untrue. A thought can feel urgent and still be old conditioning. A thought can sound like your voice and still come from fear. The ego survives by making old suffering feel personal. It says, this is me, this is my story, this is my pain, this is my identity. But Buddhism gently questions the solidness of that me. It asks you to look closely. Are you the pain, or are you the one aware of the pain? Are you the memory, or are you the one seeing the memory arise? Are you the craving, or are you the one noticing the craving? Are you the old story, or are you the space in which the story appears and disappears? This question can open a door, because if you can observe the suffering, then you are not only the suffering. If you can notice the ego defending the old wound, then something wiser than the ego is already awake in you. That awareness is the beginning of freedom. It does not attack the ego. It simply stops letting the ego drive your whole life. The ego often developed to protect you when you did not know another way. Maybe there was a time when holding on to pain helped you make sense of confusion. Maybe anger gave you strength when sadness felt too heavy. Maybe suspicion helped you avoid trusting the wrong people. Maybe emotional control helped you survive a place where honesty was unsafe. Maybe replaying the past helped you search for a lesson when life felt unfair. These defenses may have had a purpose. They may have protected you for a season. But what protects you in one season can imprison you in another. A coat keeps you warm in winter, but if you refuse to remove it in summer, it becomes a burden. In the same way, the ego's old defenses may have helped you survive emotional winter. But if you keep wearing them after the season has changed, they will make peace feel uncomfortable. They will make openness feel dangerous. They will make healing feel like exposure. They will make love feel like risk. They will make silence feel like a threat. The ego protects old suffering because old suffering gives it something to do. It can stay busy analyzing, defending, remembering, comparing, blaming, explaining, and preparing. Peace gives the ego less work, and that can feel frightening. When the mind is no longer occupied by the old wound, it must face the quiet. It must face the present moment. It must face the emptiness beneath the noise. But in Buddhism, this quiet is not something to fear. It is where truth becomes visible. The present moment does not need your old story to exist. The breath does not ask who betrayed you. The sky does not ask who misunderstood you. The body does not need to carry yesterday's wound to deserve rest today. But the ego keeps dragging the past into the present because it fears disappearing without it. It believes that if the story ends, the self built around the story will end too. And in a way, it is right. Something will end. The false self will begin to loosen. The version of you that needed pain to feel real will begin to fade. The identity that survived through tension will no longer be the center. But this ending is not death. It is release. It is the dropping of a mask you wore for too long. It is the soft return to a self deeper than the wound. The ego also protects suffering through pride. Sometimes it says, "I gave too much to leave now." This is the pain of investment. You stayed, waited, explained, cried, forgave, hoped, and tried again. So leaving can feel like admitting that all those efforts did not lead where you wanted them to lead. The ego hates that kind of admission. It would rather keep suffering than accept that some investments cannot be recovered. It says, "After all I endured, this must become worth it." But suffering longer does not turn the wrong path into the right one. This is hard because the heart wants meaning. It wants every sacrifice to produce a reward. It wants every tear to lead to restoration. It wants every painful season to end with proof that staying was wise. But life does not always work that way. Sometimes the meaning is not that the situation finally becomes good. Sometimes the meaning is that you finally learn not to abandon yourself for the promise of someday. The ego says, "If I leave now, I lose." Wisdom says, "If I keep betraying myself, I lose more." The ego says, "I must make them understand." Wisdom says, "Understanding that requires your self-destruction is not peace." The ego says, "I need to prove I was worth loving." Wisdom says, "Your worth was never waiting for their recognition." The ego says, "I cannot let this story end like this." Wisdom says, "Some stories end when you stop asking them to become your home." The ego protects old suffering by refusing to grieve. Grief is honest. Grief says, "This hurt, this mattered, this did not become what I hoped." But the ego often avoids grief by staying attached. Attachment keeps the person, pattern, or memory close enough that you do not have to feel the full loss. As long as you keep returning, checking, hoping, or replaying, the grief remains delayed. But delayed grief does not disappear. It waits, and often the fear of that grief is what makes people hold on to suffering. The ego says, "Do not let go, because the sadness will be too much." But sadness is not the enemy. Sadness is often the doorway out of illusion. When you finally let yourself grieve what was never safe, the spell begins to break. You stop needing the past to become different. You stop bargaining with what has already shown itself. You stop pretending that a repeated wound is still a mystery. Grief clears the fog. It hurts, but it does not trap you the way denial does. Buddhist wisdom teaches that pain is part of life, but clinging turns pain into prolonged suffering. Grief is pain moving through. Attachment is pain being held in place. This is why the ego prefers attachment. Attachment gives the ego control. Grief asks the ego to bow. It asks the ego to admit, "I could not force this to become what I wanted." That humility can feel unbearable at first, but it is also deeply freeing. Another way the ego protects old suffering is by turning it into superiority. Sometimes, after being hurt, a person begins to feel proud of how much they can endure. They become the strong one, the unbothered one, the one who needs no one, the one who has seen too much to be fooled. This identity may look powerful from the outside, but inside it can be another form of bondage. If your strength depends on staying closed, then your strength is still controlled by the wound. Real strength is not the refusal to feel. Real strength is the ability to feel without becoming lost. Real strength is not saying, "Nothing can touch me." It is saying, "I can be touched by life and still remain awake." The ego builds armor. Wisdom builds awareness. Armor may stop some pain from entering, but it also stops tenderness from reaching you. Awareness allows you to meet life with open eyes, not a closed heart. The ego protects old suffering because it fears being ordinary again. Pain can make a person feel marked, different, special in their sadness. This is delicate, but it is true. Sometimes suffering becomes the thing that makes life feel intense. The story of being wounded can become the center of attention inside the mind. It gives every mood an explanation and every fear a history. Letting go may feel like becoming plain, like losing the dramatic weight of the old story. But peace is not plain. Peace is depth without chaos. Peace is meaning without self-destruction. Peace is presence without the need for a wound to prove you are alive. In Buddhist practice, the ego softens when you stop feeding it with constant identification. You do not say, "I am ruined." You say, "Pain is present." You do not say, "I am unwanted." You say, "A feeling of rejection is present." You do not say, "I am my past." You say, "Memory is arising." This may sound simple, but it changes everything. It creates distance between awareness and identity. It reminds you that experiences move through you, but they do not have to define you. The ego wants to turn every passing state into a permanent self. Buddhism invites you to see that all states arise and pass. Anger arises and passes. Shame arises and passes. Longing arises and passes. Fear arises and passes. Even the craving to return arises and passes. When you stop obeying every state as if it is eternal, you begin to taste freedom. You stop saying, "This feeling is who I am," and begin saying, "This feeling is visiting." And what visits does not have to become your home. Still, the ego will not surrender old suffering all at once. It may resist gently or fiercely. It may bring back memories. It may remind you of your mistakes. It may tell you that healing is unsafe. It may tempt you with old comfort. It may say, "You are becoming cold." It may say, "You are forgetting who you are." But the deeper truth is this: you are not forgetting yourself. You are forgetting the false self that pain forced you to become. You are remembering the self beneath the defense. The self that existed before constant worry became normal. The self that could breathe without waiting for the next disappointment. The self that could love without shrinking. The self that could rest without guilt. The self that did not need to suffer to feel worthy of attention. This self may feel distant at first, but it is not gone. It has been covered. It has been waiting beneath the noise. The ego protects old suffering because old suffering gives it a map. But healing asks you to walk where there may be no familiar signs. This is why faith becomes important, not blind faith in another person, but quiet faith in the path. Faith that peace can become familiar. Faith that your body can learn safety again. Faith that your heart can soften without becoming foolish. Faith that you can live without the old story controlling every choice. Faith that the unknown is not always a threat. Sometimes the unknown is where your freedom has been waiting. There will be moments when the ego says, "Go back. At least you know how to survive there." In those moments, pause. Ask yourself, do I want to survive or do I want to live? Because there is a difference. Surviving means keeping your head above water. Living means stepping onto dry land. Surviving means managing pain. Living means no longer arranging your life around it. Surviving means knowing how to endure the old storm. Living means allowing yourself to leave the storm behind. The ego may not understand this at first. It may say peace is risky. It may say healing is uncertain. It may say the old pain is safer because it is known. But you can answer gently, "Thank you for trying to protect me, but I do not need this suffering anymore." This is important. You do not have to fight the ego with hatred. Fighting it often makes it stronger. You can meet it with compassion and firmness, like an old guard who worked too long after the war ended. You can say, "You helped me survive, but now I am learning to be free." That is a powerful inner shift. Instead of shaming yourself for clinging, you understand the protection beneath the clinging. Instead of calling yourself weak, you see the fear beneath the return. Instead of attacking your old defenses, you retire them with gratitude. This is Buddhist compassion applied inward. You do not create peace by starting another war inside yourself. You create peace by seeing clearly, releasing gently, and choosing wisely. The ego begins to soften when it sees that healing will not destroy you. Every time you choose not to return to old suffering and you survive the discomfort, the ego learns. Every time you sit with longing without obeying it, the ego learns. Every time you allow sadness without rebuilding the cage, the ego learns. Every time you choose a calm truth over a familiar wound, the ego learns. Slowly it stops treating peace like danger. Slowly it begins to trust the open space. And one day the old suffering will no longer feel like something you must defend. It will become part of your history, not the center of your identity. You will be able to say, "Yes, that happened. Yes, it changed me. Yes, it hurt. But it is not where I live anymore." There will be no need to prove the wound, no need to keep showing it, no need to return to it for meaning. You will know it was real, and that will be enough. You will not need to keep bleeding to validate the injury. This is the quiet freedom the ego never knew how to offer. The ego could help you survive, but it could not teach you peace. It could guard the wound, but it could not heal it. It could remember danger, but it could not open the heart to wisdom. It could build walls, but it could not show you the sky beyond them. For that, you need awareness. You need compassion. You need the courage to stop mistaking an old defense for your true self. So when the ego rises to protect old suffering, do not be surprised. It is only doing what it learned. It is trying to keep you inside a pain it already understands. But you are allowed to outgrow the place where your ego learned survival. You are allowed to step beyond the identity that was built in fear. You are allowed to stop defending the wound and start protecting your peace. The old suffering may say, "You know me." The ego may say, "Stay with what we know." But wisdom will say, "You were not born only to survive what hurt you. You were born to awaken from it." And the more you listen to that wisdom, the less power the old story has over you. The cage may still be familiar, but the door is open now. And this time, you do not have to decorate the cage, defend the cage, or call the cage home. You can walk out gently with nothing to prove, carrying only the lesson and leaving the suffering behind. And after the ego has spent so long guarding the old cage, defending the old wound, and calling survival a home, healing can feel less like freedom and more like danger. Not because healing is harmful, but because it asks the wounded part of you to stop living by the rules that once helped you survive. It asks the ego to step down. It asks the nervous system to stop scanning for storms. It asks the heart to stop treating chaos like proof that something important is happening. And when chaos has been your normal for too long, peace does not always feel peaceful at first. Sometimes it feels like standing in a quiet room and waiting for something to go wrong. There is a deep fear in becoming calm when you have spent years preparing for impact. The silence feels too wide. The stillness feels too unfamiliar. The absence of conflict feels suspicious. You may tell yourself you want peace, and you do, but when peace finally comes close, part of you may not know how to receive it. Something inside may say, "This cannot be real. Something must be hidden. Something must be coming." And just like that, the mind begins searching for danger in the very place where healing is trying to begin. This is one reason people return to what broke them. Chaos gives the mind a task. It gives the body a rhythm. It gives the ego something to manage. There is always a message to interpret, a mood to study, a distance to explain, a wound to cover, a sign to chase, a reaction to prepare for. In chaos, you are busy. In chaos, you do not have to sit still with yourself. In chaos, your pain has a schedule. But healing slows everything down, and that slowdown can feel terrifying because suddenly there is no storm outside loud enough to distract you from the storm inside. Buddhist wisdom understands this very clearly. The path inward does not begin by decorating life with nice words. It begins by seeing suffering without running from it. It teaches that the mind becomes attached not only to pleasure, but also to agitation. Agitation can become a strange addiction because it keeps the self occupied. When there is constant emotional noise, you do not have to face the emptiness beneath it. You do not have to face the grief you postponed, the loneliness you avoided, the shame you buried, or the deep tiredness you called strength. Chaos keeps everything moving, and what keeps moving does not have to be felt deeply. Healing asks you to stop running. That is why it feels threatening. It brings you back to the present moment, and the present moment may be the very place you have been avoiding. When you are caught in old patterns, your mind lives in yesterday and tomorrow. Yesterday gives you memories to replay. Tomorrow gives you fears to prepare for. But healing brings you into now. It asks, what is here beneath the story? What is here beneath the craving? What is here when there is no one to chase, no wound to defend, no chaos to solve? For a person used to emotional disorder, that question can feel almost too naked. When chaos becomes normal, the body mistakes intensity for life. It begins to think that love must come with fear, that connection must come with uncertainty, that closeness must feel like hunger, and that peace must be boring. This is not because the body is foolish. It is because the body adapts. If your life has taught you that affection comes after distance, that apology comes after pain, that attention comes after begging, or that calmness never lasts, your system learns to expect emotional swings. It begins to treat highs and lows as the natural shape of connection. Then, when something gentle arrives, the body may not know where to place it. A steady person may feel too simple. A peaceful environment may feel too quiet. A healthy boundary may feel like rejection. A calm conversation may feel incomplete because no one is fighting to be heard. A love that does not force you to earn it may feel unreal because your heart is used to proving itself. This is how chaos trains perception. It does not only hurt you while it is happening, it changes what you recognize as real. And when healing appears, it challenges that recognition. Healing says, you do not have to live tense anymore. But the body replies, tension kept me ready. Healing says, you do not have to chase anymore. But the heart replies, chasing is how I proved I cared. Healing says, you do not have to explain yourself to people who refuse to hear you. But the ego replies, explaining kept me from feeling powerless. Healing says, you can rest now. But the wounded mind replies, rest is dangerous. Every time I rested before, something hurt me. So healing is not only about choosing peace, it is about teaching the whole self that peace is safe. This teaching takes time because chaos often enters a person's life slowly. At first, it is one disappointment, one confusing conversation, one broken promise, one moment where you silence yourself to avoid losing someone. One time you accept less because you are afraid to ask for more. Then it happens again and again. Before long, you are living inside a pattern you never consciously chose. You adjust, you explain, you normalize, you make yourself smaller. You call it patience, you call it understanding, you call it love. And by the time you realize your peace is gone, chaos already feels like the emotional climate of your life. This is why healing can feel like moving to a new country where you do not yet speak the language. Peace may be present, but you do not understand its signals. You are used to reading danger. You know how to read silence as punishment, distance as rejection, change in tone as threat, delay as abandonment, and small affection as relief. But you may not know how to read consistency. You may not know how to read respect. You may not know how to read a calm day without searching for what is hidden under it. The language of peace must be learned. Buddhist practice helps because it does not force you to trust peace instantly. It invites you to observe what happens inside you when peace appears. You notice the restlessness. You notice the suspicion. You notice the urge to create a problem, reopen an old door, check on someone, or return to a familiar wound. You do not judge it. You simply see it. This seeing is powerful because what is seen clearly begins to lose its unconscious control. The moment you can say, my body is uncomfortable because nothing is wrong, you have already begun to wake up. The moment you can say, I am looking for chaos because calm feels unfamiliar, you have interrupted the old pattern. The moment you can say, this urge to return is not love, it is my system searching for what it knows, you are no longer completely trapped inside it. Awareness creates space, and space is where freedom begins. But the mind will resist this space. It may try to fill it quickly. It may bring back old memories. It may replay old conversations. It may make you wonder whether you were too harsh, too sensitive, too quick to leave, or too slow to forgive. It may turn silence into a courtroom where you judge yourself again and again. This is not a sign that healing is failing. It is a sign that the old mind is losing its usual distraction and trying to bring the noise back. You must understand this clearly. The return of old thoughts does not mean the old life was right for you. It only means the mind is detoxing from familiar disorder. When you stop feeding a pattern, the pattern often becomes louder for a while. It asks to be fed again. It reminds you of the comfort. It hides the cost. It tells you the old chaos was not so bad. But if you look carefully, you will notice that it is only offering you the same chain with a softer voice. Healing feels threatening because it removes the illusion that someone else's change is the key to your peace. As long as you are focused on chaos outside you, you can believe that life will become calm when they apologize, when they understand, when they return, when they choose you, when they become consistent, when they stop hurting you. But healing says, your peace cannot depend on the awakening of the person or pattern that kept you asleep. That truth can feel painful because it gives your freedom back to you. And freedom, when you are used to waiting, can feel like a heavy responsibility. It means you can no longer postpone your life until someone else becomes gentle. You can no longer place your healing in the hands of the one who keeps reopening the wound. You can no longer say, I will be okay when the past changes. The past may never change. The person may never explain. The apology may never come. The ending may never feel fair. But Buddhist wisdom does not say you need fairness before freedom. It says you need clear seeing. You need the courage to stop drinking from a cup that keeps making you thirsty. Chaos also becomes normal when it gives you a sense of purpose. This may sound uncomfortable, but it is true. Some people do not know who they are unless they are fixing, saving, chasing, proving, or enduring. Their pain gives them a mission. Their suffering gives them something to wake up and solve. If a relationship is unstable, there is always work to do. If someone is distant, there is always love to win. If a wound is open, there is always a reason to focus on it. But when healing begins, that mission starts to dissolve, and without it, the person may feel lost. Who are you when you are no longer trying to be chosen? Who are you when you stop explaining your worth? Who are you when you are no longer managing someone else's emotional weather? Who are you when you no longer need to prove that you are good enough to keep? These questions can shake the heart. They reveal that sometimes the chaos did not only take from you, it also gave you a role. And now healing is asking you to step out of that role before you know what comes next. This is why some people unconsciously recreate problems after finding peace. They may pick fights, overthink small things, mistrust good intentions, test people, withdraw suddenly, or return to old pain. Not because they want to suffer, but because suffering gives them a familiar identity. Calmness feels like standing without armor. Gentleness feels like exposure. Love without struggle feels too open. So they create the old atmosphere again, simply because their system knows how to function in it. But Buddhist wisdom would ask you to treat this pattern with compassion and honesty. Not compassion that excuses everything, and not honesty that becomes harshness. Compassion says, this was learned. Honesty says, this must not continue. Compassion says, you adapted to survive. Honesty says, you are now allowed to adapt to peace. Both are needed. Without compassion, you drown in shame. Without honesty, you stay trapped. Healing becomes less threatening when you stop seeing it as a sudden transformation and start seeing it as a training. You are training the mind to stay present without panic. You are training the body to rest without expecting punishment. You are training the heart to receive love without chasing pain. You are training the ego to release control without feeling destroyed. You are training your whole being to understand that calm is not the absence of life. Calm is life without unnecessary suffering. This training begins in small moments. You wake up and do not check what used to disturb your peace. You feel lonely and do not run back to a harmful comfort. You notice a quiet day and let it remain quiet. You feel the urge to create emotional noise and instead you breathe. You let someone be kind to you without searching for the hidden cost. You accept a boundary without calling it abandonment. You allow silence to be silence, not a sign of danger. These moments may look small, but they are not small. They are the nervous system learning a new world. The old world was built on reaction. Something happened and you reacted. Someone withdrew and you panicked. Someone returned and you felt relief. Someone hurt you and you explained it away. Someone gave you crumbs, and you called it hope. In that world, your inner state depended on outside movement. Healing begins when your inner life stops being controlled by every external wave. This does not mean you feel nothing. It means you stop handing your whole spirit to every passing condition. This is one of the central gifts of Buddhist wisdom. It teaches that everything conditioned is unstable. Praise comes and goes, blame comes and goes, pleasure comes and goes, pain comes and goes, people come and go, moods come and go. The mind suffers when it clings to what is always changing and tries to make it permanent. Chaos becomes normal when you build your peace on unstable things. Healing begins when you stop asking unstable things to become your foundation. This does not mean you stop loving people. It means you stop making your existence depend on their changing moods. It does not mean you become cold. It means you stop letting attachment disguise itself as devotion. It does not mean you withdraw from life. It means you learn how to participate in life without losing yourself inside every emotional storm. When chaos has been normal, the body may believe that peace must be earned through suffering. You may feel guilty when things become easier. You may feel undeserving when someone treats you gently. You may feel uneasy when life is not asking you to fight. This is because pain can train you to see struggle as proof of value. You may think, if I did not suffer for it, maybe it is not real. But wisdom says the opposite. What is real does not always need to wound you first. What is healthy does not require constant emotional payment. What is meant to nourish you does not keep making you prove you deserve nourishment. Healing asks you to receive without panic, to rest without guilt, to enjoy without waiting for loss, to breathe without preparing a defense. These are not easy when your system has been trained by instability, but they are possible. The mind can learn, the body can soften. The heart can become familiar with safety the same way it once became familiar with chaos. But first, you must stop romanticizing the storm. Some people look back at chaos and call it passion because it was intense. They call it deep because it hurt. They call it unforgettable because it kept them emotionally awake. But not everything unforgettable is sacred. Some things are unforgettable because they injured you. Some people are hard to forget because they trained your nervous system into constant alert. Some bonds feel powerful because they activated your deepest fear. Intensity is not always intimacy. Sometimes it is simply the body trying to survive unpredictability. Healing feels threatening because it asks you to give up the rush of waiting, the rush of being chosen after being ignored, the rush of reunion after distance, the rush of apology after pain, the rush of hope after disappointment. These emotional highs can become powerful because they arrive after lows. The lower the pain, the stronger the relief can feel. But relief after suffering is not the same as peace. It is only the nervous system escaping distress for a moment. A person who is used to this cycle may mistake relief for love. When the person returns, the body relaxes. When the apology comes, the heart opens. When the message arrives, the anxiety drops. And because the body feels better, the mind says, "This must be love." But sometimes, what you are feeling is not love. It is withdrawal ending. It is fear calming down. It is the nervous system receiving the thing it was desperate for. Buddhist awareness helps you ask, is this true peace, or is this temporary relief from a pattern that keeps hurting me? That question protects you. Healing also threatens the part of you that is attached to being right about your pain. If you have lived for years expecting people to leave, disappoint, use, or misunderstand you, then a peaceful life challenges your old belief system. It says, maybe not everything will hurt you. Maybe not every connection is unsafe. Maybe not every silence is rejection. Maybe not every boundary is abandonment. This can create inner conflict because part of you wants to believe in peace while another part keeps collecting evidence for pain. The ego may even feel more comfortable when something goes wrong because it can say, "See, I knew it." Being right about suffering can feel safer than being open to joy. But being right about pain is not the same as being free. You do not need life to keep proving your wound was real. It was real. You do not need every new person to pass the test created by an old injury. You do not need to turn your past into a prophecy. Healing asks you to stop using yesterday's wound as tomorrow's prediction. This is not naive, it is wise. Wisdom remembers the past without becoming imprisoned by it. Wisdom allows boundaries without building a prison around the heart. Wisdom sees clearly without assuming every future moment will repeat the worst thing that happened before. Wisdom knows that caution can protect you, but constant fear will shrink you. Buddhist healing is not about pretending chaos never happened. It is about refusing to let chaos remain your teacher forever. At some point, peace must become the new teacher. Stillness must teach you how to listen. Breath must teach you how to return. Compassion must teach you how to soften. Impermanence must teach you how to release. Awareness must teach you how to stop obeying every old fear. When healing feels threatening, do not conclude that you are going backward. Often, this feeling means you are standing at the edge of a new pattern. The old self is uncomfortable because it cannot use its old tools. The old defenses do not fit. The old reactions feel tired. The old chaos no longer satisfies you the way it once did. But the new peace has not become familiar yet. This middle place can feel confusing. You are no longer fully who you were, but you are not yet fully settled into who you are becoming. This is where patience becomes sacred. You must give yourself permission to be new at peace. You must allow yourself to feel awkward in calmness. You must let your body learn slowly. You must not shame yourself for missing chaos. Missing chaos does not mean chaos was good. It means chaos was familiar. A person can miss a place they were never meant to stay. A person can feel drawn to a pattern that damaged them. This does not make them weak. It makes them human. But being human does not mean you must obey every pull. When the urge to return to disorder comes, meet it like a visitor. Do not let it become the owner of the house. Say, "I know you. You are the old normal. You are the part of me that thinks peace is unsafe. You are the memory of storms. But I am learning a different way." Then breathe. Not to escape the feeling, but to stay present with it. Breathing tells the body, "We are here. We are safe enough in this moment. We do not need to run backward." The more you do this, the more healing becomes less threatening. Not because life becomes perfect, but because your relationship with discomfort changes. You learn that anxiety can rise without becoming a command. You learn that loneliness can ache without deciding your future. You learn that peace can feel strange without being wrong. You learn that calmness can hold you if you stop fighting it. You learn that the absence of chaos is not emptiness. It is the beginning of space. And in that space, you begin to meet yourself. Not the self built from panic, chasing, defending, proving, or surviving. The quieter self, the self that does not need drama to feel alive. The self that does not need to be hurt to feel deep. The self that can love without disappearing. The self that can care without clinging. The self that can remember without returning. The self that can walk through life with open eyes and a softer heart. This is the self-chaos kept hidden. When chaos is normal, you live outside yourself. Your attention is always pulled toward the next problem, the next emotional shift, the next uncertainty. Healing returns attention to its rightful home. It brings your energy back from the people and patterns that scattered it. It teaches you to stop leaking yourself into situations that never nourish you. It teaches you that your peace is not a luxury. It is the ground from which your life becomes clear. At first, peace may feel like a threat because it removes the old noise, but over time you will begin to hear what the noise covered: your own wisdom, your own needs, your own boundaries, your own quiet joy, your own grief asking to be held, your own body asking to rest, your own spirit asking to live without always preparing for loss. And one day, the calm will no longer frighten you. You will not need to create a storm to feel real. You will not need to return to confusion to feel connected. You will not need to chase what withdraws from you to feel worthy. You will not need pain to give your life meaning. You will understand that healing was never the threat. The real threat was staying loyal to chaos because it was familiar. The storm may have taught you how to survive, but it cannot teach you how to be free. Freedom comes when you stop mistaking peace for danger. Freedom comes when you let calm feel unfamiliar without running from it. Freedom comes when you allow your body to learn that not every quiet moment is waiting to become pain. Freedom comes when you finally stop calling chaos home just because you know where everything is inside it. So if healing feels uncomfortable, do not turn back too quickly. Stay with the discomfort. Let it teach you. Let it show you where chaos became normal. Let it reveal the places inside you that still expect pain. Let it soften the old alarms. Let it prove, moment by moment, that peace can be trusted. You are not losing yourself. You are losing the version of yourself that only knew how to survive in disorder. And that loss, though frightening at first, is sacred, because beneath the fear is a life that no longer has to be organized around wounds. Beneath the silence is a mind that can finally rest. Beneath the unfamiliar calm is a home that does not require you to bleed to belong. And when peace begins to feel like a home that does not demand your pain as rent, another truth becomes impossible to ignore. The deepest suffering is not always caused by the person who hurt you. Sometimes it continues because attachment keeps your heart tied to them long after your spirit has already recognized the damage. This is where Buddhist wisdom becomes sharp, tender, and difficult. It does not ask, "Did they hurt you?" only. It asks, "Why are you still holding the hand that keeps leading you back into suffering?" There is a pain that comes from being hurt, and there is another pain that comes from not being able to release the one who hurt you. The first pain may come suddenly. The second pain grows quietly. It hides in longing, excuses, memories, guilt, desire, hope, and the fear that if you let go, something sacred will be lost forever. You may know they wounded your peace. You may know they made you question your worth. You may know your body became tired from carrying the uncertainty, yet one part of you still reaches for them, as if the same hand that caused the wound can somehow become the hand that heals it. This is the strange truth about attachment. It can keep you loyal to someone who is not loyal to your well-being. It can make you defend what damages you. It can make you miss what exhausted you. It can make you call your suffering love because the feeling is deep, powerful, and hard to control. But Buddhist wisdom does not measure love by intensity alone. It looks at what attachment does to the mind. Does it bring clarity or confusion? Does it bring compassion or fear? Does it open your heart, or does it make you cling harder to what keeps slipping away? In Buddhism, attachment is not simply caring about someone. This matters. Caring is not the problem. Loving is not the problem. Wanting connection is not the problem. The problem begins when the mind clings so tightly that it loses balance. Attachment says, "I cannot be okay unless this person changes, returns, chooses me, explains, apologizes, understands, or becomes who I need them to be." Love can wish someone well and still remain free. Attachment says, "My peace is trapped inside your behavior." That is why attachment to someone who hurt you becomes so painful. You are not only dealing with their actions, you are dealing with the way your mind has wrapped your peace around their presence. If they are warm, you feel hope. If they are distant, you feel abandoned. If they speak kindly, you feel alive again. If they ignore you, your whole inner world begins to shake. This is not freedom. This is emotional dependence disguised as depth. Buddhist wisdom teaches that clinging creates suffering because everything you cling to is unstable. People change, moods change, attention changes, promises change, feelings rise and fade. A person can be close today and distant tomorrow. A message can come today and stop tomorrow. A beautiful moment can happen and still not become a safe pattern. When the mind builds its happiness on something unstable, suffering becomes unavoidable. Not because life is cruel, but because the mind is asking changing things to become permanent shelter. This is especially painful when the person has already hurt you. Because now, attachment is not only clinging to pleasure, it is clinging to a mixture of sweetness and injury. You remember the moments they made you feel seen, but you also carry the moments they made you feel small. You remember the laughter, but your body remembers the anxiety. You remember the warmth, but your spirit remembers how cold the silence became. Attachment chooses fragments. Wisdom sees the whole picture. The wounded heart often says, but they were not always bad. And that may be true. Many painful attachments survive because there were good moments. If everything had been terrible, leaving might have been easier. But the good moments become hooks. The mind keeps returning to them and saying, there was something real there. Yes, something may have been real, but something being real does not mean it was healthy. A real feeling can still exist inside an unsafe pattern. A real connection can still become a place where your peace disappears. This is one of the hardest lessons. You do not have to deny the good in someone to admit they were harmful to you. You do not have to pretend none of it mattered before you choose distance. You do not have to turn them into a monster so you can give yourself permission to leave. Buddhist wisdom invites you into a deeper honesty. There was tenderness and there was suffering. There were moments of care and there was a pattern that cost me my peace. Seeing both is maturity. Clinging to only the good parts is attachment. Clinging to only the bad parts is resentment. Freedom begins when you can see the whole truth without needing to run from it. Attachment to people who hurt you often grows from craving. Craving is the mind saying, I need this to be different before I can rest. You crave their apology, you crave their attention, you crave the version of them that appeared in the beginning, you crave the feeling you had before the hurt became clear. You crave the possibility that they will finally see your value and treat your heart with care. But craving is never satisfied for long. Even when you receive a little of what you wanted, the relief fades and the hunger returns. This is why attachment feels like a thirst that water cannot fully calm. A message may make you feel better for an hour, but soon you need another sign. An apology may soften you for a day, but if the behavior repeats, the wound reopens. A kind moment may make you believe everything is changing, but if consistency does not follow, the mind falls back into uncertainty. Attachment feeds on hope, but it rarely gives lasting peace. It keeps you reaching, waiting, interpreting, and bargaining. Buddhist wisdom asks you to look at the cost of that reaching. What happens to your mind when you are attached to someone who hurt you? Do you become peaceful or restless? Do you become clear or confused? Do you become more loving toward yourself or more willing to betray yourself? Do you become present in your life or trapped in thoughts about them? Attachment is not judged by how romantic it feels. It is understood by the suffering it produces. A person can become so attached that they start organizing their whole inner life around another person's inconsistency. Their sleep changes, their appetite changes, their mood depends on small signs, their self-worth rises and falls with attention. Their mind becomes a room where the other person is always present, even when they are physically absent. This is how attachment becomes imprisonment. The person may not even be near you, yet your thoughts keep serving them. And the painful part is that the mind may call this love. But love, in Buddhist wisdom, has more space than attachment. Love does not require possession. Love does not demand that another person become your emotional oxygen. Love does not ask you to suffer endlessly to prove it is real. Love can be warm, compassionate, and honest, but attachment is desperate. Love says, "May you be well." Attachment says, "You must be mine, or I cannot be well." Love allows reality to be seen. Attachment keeps rewriting reality to protect desire. This does not mean love is emotionless. It does not mean you should become detached in a cold way. It means the heart must learn the difference between open care and desperate clinging. You can care deeply for someone and still know they are not safe for your peace. You can wish someone healing and still refuse to become the place where their unhealed pain keeps landing. You can forgive someone and still understand that returning may reopen the suffering. This is not bitterness. This is wisdom with boundaries. Attachment becomes especially strong when the hurt person believes they need the one who hurt them to undo the damage. This is a powerful trap. The heart says, if they would just explain, I could move on. If they would just say sorry properly, I could heal. If they would just choose me, I would feel enough. If they would just admit what they did, I could finally breathe. But when your healing depends entirely on another person's awareness, you remain tied to their level of growth. If they stay asleep, do you stay wounded forever? If they never understand, do you never become free? Buddhist wisdom gently returns your freedom to you. It does not promise that everyone who hurt you will awaken. It does not promise that every story will end with justice in the way your heart wanted. It does not promise that people will always understand the pain they caused. But it teaches that you can stop letting another person's ignorance become your prison. Their inability to see clearly does not have to block your own seeing. Their lack of remorse does not have to decide the length of your suffering. This is where acceptance becomes powerful. Acceptance does not mean approving what happened. It means you stop arguing with reality. You stop saying, they should have been different, as if that sentence can change the past. You stop waiting for the person who caused confusion to become the source of clarity. You stop treating their potential as more important than their pattern. Acceptance says, this is what has been shown to me. This is what it costs me. This is what I must now choose with open eyes. The ego may fight this because attachment often carries pride. The ego says, I cannot believe I gave so much to someone who hurt me. It says, I cannot leave before they admit I mattered. It says, I need them to know what they lost. It says, I need the story to end in a way that proves I was worth more. But your worth does not need to be proven by the regret of someone who failed to value it. Your dignity does not depend on whether they return with understanding. Your healing does not need their permission. Attachment also hides inside guilt. You may feel guilty for walking away, especially if the person who hurt you also has pain of their own. You may think, they are wounded too. They did not know better. They need someone. Maybe I am abandoning them. Compassion is beautiful, but when compassion makes you abandon yourself, it has lost wisdom. Buddhism does not teach you to set yourself on fire to warm someone who refuses to stop standing in the cold. It teaches compassion for all beings, and you are included in all beings. You can understand someone's suffering without volunteering to be harmed by it. You can see their wounds without letting those wounds become weapons against your peace. You can feel sadness for what shaped them and still say, I cannot keep paying the price for pain they refuse to heal. This is not cruelty. It is balance. Compassion without boundaries becomes self-erasure. Boundaries without compassion can become hardness. The middle way is clear, kind, and firm. The Buddhist truth about attachment is that what you cling to, you fear losing, and what you fear losing can begin to control you. If you fear losing someone's attention, you may silence your truth. If you fear losing their affection, you may accept behavior that slowly harms you. If you fear losing the story, you may ignore the facts. If you fear losing the hope, you may keep feeding a pattern that has already shown its nature. Attachment makes fear the hidden ruler of the heart. This is why freedom requires letting the fear be felt without obeyed. You may fear being alone. You may fear never finding that connection again. You may fear that leaving means you failed. You may fear that they will change for someone else. You may fear that you will miss them forever. These fears are human, but they are not always truthful guides. Fear speaks from the wound. Wisdom speaks from awareness. The practice is learning which voice you are following. When you are attached to someone who hurt you, memory becomes selective. It turns into a small altar where you keep the best moments polished and glowing. You return to the first conversation, the sweet promise, the rare tenderness, the day they looked at you like you mattered. But memory may leave out the waiting, the confusion, the self-doubt, the crying, the emotional hunger, the way you had to lower your needs just to keep the bond alive. Buddhist mindfulness asks you to bring the full memory into the room, not to torture yourself, but to stop worshipping an edited version of the past. Because attachment survives through editing. It says, remember how good it could be. Wisdom asks, how often was it actually good? Attachment says, they have a soft side. Wisdom asks, did their softness create safety or only temporary relief? Attachment says, I know they care deep down. Wisdom asks, can care that does not protect your peace be enough to build a life around? Attachment says, I cannot let go. Wisdom asks, what are you afraid will happen if you do? That last question is the doorway. Because often, attachment is not only about the other person, it is about what they represent. They may represent being chosen. They may represent the childhood wound finally being repaired. They may represent proof that you are lovable. They may represent the dream of being understood without having to beg. They may represent the version of life you wanted so badly. So when you try to let go of them, you feel as if you are letting go of all of that. But you are not. You are letting go of a person or pattern that could not carry what you placed on it. Your need to be loved is valid. Your desire to be chosen is human. Your longing to be understood is not wrong. But the person who hurt you may not be the safe container for those needs. Sometimes healing begins when you stop forcing sacred needs into unsafe hands. Buddhist wisdom teaches that suffering softens when craving is understood, not hated, understood. You do not have to hate your attachment. You need to see what it is trying to do. It is trying to get safety. It is trying to get relief. It is trying to get completion. It is trying to get proof. It is trying to return to a moment before the pain became obvious. The attachment is not evil. It is confused. It is reaching outward for something that must now be cultivated inward. This is why meditation, mindfulness, and self-observation matter. They teach you to sit with longing without becoming its servant. You can feel the ache in your chest and breathe. You can feel the desire to return and pause. You can let the memory come and go without building a decision around it. You can say, attachment is here, instead of saying, I must go back. That small change creates inner space. In that space, the old chain begins to loosen. The practice is not to become emotionless. The practice is to stop letting emotion become command. Missing someone does not mean you must contact them. Loving someone does not mean you must trust them again. Understanding someone does not mean you must return. Feeling pain does not mean you are making the wrong choice. Sometimes pain is the feeling of the chain breaking. Sometimes grief is the sound of freedom being born. Attachment to people who hurt you often weakens your self-trust. Every time you return to what your body warned you about, a quiet part of you learns that your own pain will not be taken seriously. Every time you excuse what disturbed your peace, you teach yourself that your boundaries are negotiable. Every time you abandon your own knowing to protect the bond, you move farther from your inner ground. This is why leaving is not only about separating from them, it is about returning to trust with yourself. Self-trust is rebuilt through small acts of loyalty to your own peace. You listen when your body tightens. You believe the pattern, not only the promise. You stop arguing with your own discomfort. You stop asking other people to approve the boundary your spirit already knows you need. You stop giving endless chances to what keeps producing the same wound. And slowly, you begin to feel something you may have lost. The quiet strength of knowing you will no longer abandon yourself to keep someone close. This is not easy because attachment often creates withdrawal. When you begin to pull away, the mind may panic. It may bring back memories with painful sweetness. It may tell you that you are cold. It may tell you that you are making a mistake. It may tell you they are the only one. It may make the old bond look suddenly beautiful, not because it has changed, but because distance threatens the craving. This is why you must be careful during lonely moments. Loneliness can make a harmful attachment look like home again. During those moments, do not ask, "Do I miss them?" Of course you may miss them. Ask instead, "What happens to me when I return?" That question brings reality back. What happens to your mind? What happens to your sleep? What happens to your dignity? What happens to your peace? What happens to your ability to be present in your own life? Attachment asks whether you want them. Wisdom asks whether the wanting is freeing you or binding you. Buddhism does not ask you to reject love. It asks you to purify love from clinging. It asks you to love without possession, care without self-destruction, forgive without blindness, remember without imprisonment, and leave without hatred. This is a high practice. It is not the easy way. Hatred can sometimes feel easier because hatred gives the ego energy. Clinging can feel easier because clinging keeps the story alive. But peaceful release requires deeper courage. It says, "I will not hate you, but I will not keep hurting myself for you. I will not curse your path, but I will not abandon mine. I will not deny what I felt, but I will not let what I felt become a chain." That is Buddhist freedom. It is the freedom of seeing that no person, no matter how deeply loved, should become the owner of your mind. No memory should become a prison. No desire should become a master. No wound should become a reason to keep walking into harm. The heart can be tender and still be wise. The spirit can forgive and still move away. The mind can remember and still become quiet again. There may come a moment when you realize that the attachment was not truly holding you to them. It was holding you to a version of yourself that kept hoping pain would finally turn into love. And when that hope begins to dissolve, you may grieve deeply. Let yourself grieve. Grief is not failure. Grief is the heart telling the truth after a long season of pretending. Let it move through you without using it as an excuse to return. Let the tears cleanse the illusion. Let the ache open space. Let the ending teach you that love does not have to become possession to be real. The person who hurt you may always have a place in your memory, but memory is not a command. They may have shaped part of your story, but they do not have to shape your future. They may have awakened deep feelings, but deep feelings do not always point toward the right path. Sometimes they point toward the wound that is asking to be healed. Sometimes the person you cannot release is not your destiny. They are the mirror showing you where attachment has been mistaken for love. And once you see this clearly, something in you begins to loosen. You stop needing to solve them. You stop needing to rescue the past. You stop needing the wound to become beautiful before you leave it. You stop calling your bondage devotion. You stop confusing the ache of craving with the voice of truth. You begin to understand that the path is not to force the heart to forget, but to teach the heart that it can love itself enough not to return. This is the Buddhist truth about attachment to people who hurt you. The suffering continues as long as you keep placing your peace inside hands that have not learned how to hold it. Freedom begins when you take your peace back, not with anger, not with revenge, not with a loud performance, but with calm awareness. You see the bond clearly, you see the cost clearly, you see your craving clearly, and then, breath by breath, you choose not to be ruled by it. You may still care, you may still remember, you may still feel tenderness rise at unexpected times. But now there is wisdom beside the tenderness, there is awareness beside the longing, there is self-respect beside the compassion. And this changes everything, because when love is guided by wisdom, it no longer drags you back into suffering. It becomes spacious, it becomes honest, it becomes free. So if your heart still reaches for someone who hurt you, do not begin with shame. Begin with seeing. See the longing, see the fear, see the hope, see the pattern, see the cost. See the part of you that still believes your peace depends on them. Then gently return that peace to yourself. Again and again. This is the practice. This is the path. This is how attachment begins to soften. And one day you will think of them without losing yourself. You will remember without reopening the wound. You will care without clinging. You will forgive without returning. You will understand that what you called attachment was really a wounded search for safety, and what you call freedom now is the quiet ability to let love exist without letting it destroy your peace. And when attachment begins to soften, something deeper becomes visible. You do not only see the person you were attached to, you begin to see the version of yourself that was created by returning again and again. You begin to notice how repetition did more than keep the wound alive. It trained your mind, shaped your reactions, changed your expectations, and quietly taught you to call pain by your own name. This is how suffering becomes identity, not in one loud moment, not in one clear decision, but through repeated experiences that slowly convince you, this is just who I am now. There is a quiet sadness in becoming used to pain. At first, it hurts. Then it becomes familiar. Then it becomes normal. Then one day, without noticing, you stop saying, "This happened to me," and begin living as if it is you. This is how repetition works. It does not need your permission. It only needs your attention again and again. The first time you are hurt, you may feel shocked. The second time, you may feel confused. The third time, you may begin to expect it. After enough times, your mind stops treating the pain as an event and starts treating it as a truth. It says, people leave. Love hurts. I am hard to choose. Peace never lasts. I always get disappointed. These thoughts may feel like wisdom, but often they are only wounds that have been repeated long enough to sound like facts. Buddhist wisdom teaches that the mind is shaped by what it returns to. What you think often becomes familiar. What you feel often becomes easier to access. What you repeat becomes a path inside you. Every time you return to the same suffering, the mind learns the route more clearly. It knows where to go when you feel lonely. It knows what memory to replay when silence arrives. It knows what fear to open when someone becomes distant. It knows what story to tell when life becomes uncertain. And because the path is familiar, the mind walks it without asking whether it is still true. This is why repeated pain becomes dangerous, not only because it hurts, but because it teaches you to expect more hurt. It changes the way you enter new rooms, new relationships, new opportunities, and even new versions of yourself. You may carry old disappointment into places that have not harmed you yet. You may hear rejection in words that were never meant to reject you. You may see abandonment in pauses that are only pauses. You may feel unsafe in peace because the repeated wound taught you that calm always comes before pain. Repetition turns pain into identity by making the wound feel personal. At first, the pain is connected to a person, a place, a memory, or a season. But over time, the mind begins to connect it to your worth. It does not say, "They failed to love me well." It says, "I am not lovable." It does not say, "That situation was unstable." It says, "I always attract instability." It does not say, "That person did not know how to care for me." It says, "I am too much." This is how the wound moves from the outside world into the center of the self. And once pain enters your identity, you start protecting it like truth. This is why some people defend the very beliefs that keep them suffering. If someone treats them kindly, they distrust it. If life becomes calm, they wait for the bad part. If someone values them, they question the motive. If they are offered peace, they feel restless. Not because peace is wrong, but because peace does not match the identity repeated pain created. The mind says, "This cannot be for me. I am the one who gets hurt. I am the one who waits. I am the one who is left. I am the one who is never fully chosen." And anything that challenges that identity feels unfamiliar, even if it is good. This is one of the hidden ways suffering survives. It becomes a story you recognize yourself inside. The story may be painful, but at least you know your role. You know how to act as the disappointed one. You know how to be the strong one. You know how to be the quiet one. You know how to expect less. You know how to hide your needs. You know how to smile while carrying heaviness. You know how to say, "I am fine," even when something inside you is tired of pretending. Repetition makes these roles feel natural. But Buddhist wisdom asks you to look closer. It asks, who were you before the repetition trained you? Before the repeated disappointment, before the emotional waiting, before the betrayals, before the unanswered questions, before the fear of being too much, before the habit of expecting pain, who were you? There is a self beneath the pattern. There is awareness beneath the identity. There is a deeper part of you that has been watching all of this happen, silently waiting for you to stop confusing the wound with your nature. Pain may shape behavior, but it is not your true nature. Fear may shape reactions, but it is not your deepest self. Attachment may shape choices, but it is not your final identity. The Buddhist path begins when you learn to see these patterns as conditions, not as permanent truths. A condition is something that arose because certain causes were present. If those causes change, the condition can change too. This is important because it means you are not trapped in the self that suffering created. You are not frozen inside the story repetition wrote for you. But to change the story, you must first notice how it was built. It was built through the same emotional route being traveled too many times. Each time you accepted less than you needed, the mind learned that your needs could be lowered. Each time you stayed silent to keep peace, the mind learned that your truth was dangerous. Each time you returned to someone who hurt you, the mind learned that pain and love belonged together. Each time you blamed yourself for another person's inability to be gentle, the mind learned to turn harm inward. These small repetitions became inner laws. No one wakes up one morning and decides, "I will make pain my identity." It happens slowly. You adjust once, then twice, then again. You forgive without repair. You wait without change. You hope without evidence. You explain away what your body already knows. You keep moving the boundary farther back until one day you look around and realize you are living in a place your younger self would have begged you to leave. This is why repetition must be taken seriously. A single moment can wound you, but repetition trains you. It trains the body to tense before danger. It trains the mind to expect loss. It trains the heart to confuse anxiety with closeness. It trains the ego to defend suffering. It trains the mouth to say, "It is okay," when it is not okay. It trains the eyes to look for proof that you are about to be hurt again. And after enough training, you may start calling that training your personality. You may say, "I am just guarded." But maybe you learned to be guarded after too many unsafe moments. You may say, "I overthink everything," but maybe your mind became busy because it had to predict emotional storms. You may say, "I am not good at trusting," but maybe trust was repeatedly punished. You may say, "I do not need anyone," but maybe needing people once cost you too much. These are not defects, they are adaptations. But an adaptation is not always meant to become a lifelong identity. Buddhist wisdom offers compassion here. It does not shame you for how you learn to survive. It does not say, "Why are you like this?" It asks, "What repeated experience taught you to become this way?" That question is softer and more honest. It allows you to see your patterns without hating yourself. You begin to understand that your reactions came from causes, and if they came from causes, then new causes can create new responses. This is where healing becomes possible, not by pretending the past did not shape you, but by refusing to let the past finish defining you. You can say, "Yes, I learned fear there, but I can now learn safety here." You can say, "Yes, I learned silence there, but I can now practice truth here." You can say, "Yes, I learned to expect abandonment there, but I can now learn steadiness here." New repetition creates new identity. This is important because the mind does not change only through one realization. Realization opens the door, but repetition walks through it. You can understand your wound today and still feel the old pull tomorrow. You can know the truth and still crave the pattern. You can decide to heal and still feel uncomfortable in peace. This does not mean you failed. It means the old identity was built through repetition, and it will be softened through repetition too. Every time you choose differently, even in a small way, you teach the mind something new. When you do not return to the old wound, you teach yourself that longing can be survived. When you speak honestly, you teach yourself that your voice has a place. When you rest without guilt, you teach the body that peace does not need to be earned through suffering. When you hold a boundary, you teach your spirit that it is worth protecting. When you stop chasing what withdraws from you, you teach your heart that love should not require self-abandonment. At first, these choices may feel unnatural. That is normal. The old pattern had more practice. The old identity had more time. The old pain has been repeated enough to feel like instinct. But what feels natural is not always what is true. Sometimes it is only what has been rehearsed. If fear has been rehearsed for years, fear will feel natural. If self-doubt has been rehearsed for years, self-doubt will feel natural. If returning to pain has been rehearsed for years, returning will feel natural. The task is not to obey what feels natural. The task is to ask what leads to freedom. Buddhist practice is powerful because it brings awareness into repetition. Without awareness, you repeat the pattern unconsciously. With awareness, you begin to see the moment before the repetition happens. You notice the thought before it becomes a decision. You notice the craving before it becomes a message sent. You notice the fear before it becomes withdrawal. You notice the memory before it becomes a story. You notice the old identity before it takes over your whole body. That moment of noticing is sacred. It is small, but it is where the old chain can break. You may feel the familiar ache and say, "This is the part of me that expects pain." You may feel the urge to blame yourself and say, "This is the old identity speaking." You may feel the need to return and say, "This is repetition asking to be fed." When you can name the pattern, you are no longer completely inside it. You have stepped into awareness. Awareness is not the same as control. Control says, "I must force myself to change immediately." Awareness says, "I will see clearly, and clear seeing will guide the next step." Control can become another form of inner violence. Awareness is gentler. It watches, it understands, it chooses. Buddhism does not ask you to attack the wounded self. It asks you to stop mistaking that self for your whole being. This matters because pain-based identity often survives through shame. You may shame yourself for being attached, for going back, for caring too much, for not healing fast enough. But shame only strengthens the identity. It says, "Something is wrong with me," and that sentence becomes another layer of suffering. The mind then clings even harder to old pain because shame makes freedom feel undeserved. Healing requires a different voice, a voice that says, "I learned this through suffering, and I can unlearn it through compassion." Compassion does not mean you excuse every pattern. It means you stop using hatred as the tool for change. You cannot hate yourself into peace. You cannot insult yourself into wisdom. You cannot shame the wounded mind into feeling safe. The mind that learned pain needs firmness, yes, but it also needs kindness. It needs to know that letting go will not mean being abandoned by yourself. It needs to know that healing is not another punishment. Repetition turns pain into identity by making it feel predictable. When you believe you are always the one who gets hurt, life may feel sad, but at least it feels known. Hope, on the other hand, can feel risky. Joy can feel exposed. Trust can feel like walking without a shield. This is why some people unconsciously return to disappointment. It confirms the identity. It says, "See, this is what happens to me." The confirmation hurts, but it also feels familiar. And the mind often prefers a painful confirmation over an unfamiliar possibility. To heal, you must become willing to be surprised by life again. You must allow the possibility that the old identity may not be the final truth. You must allow the possibility that not everyone will repeat the same wound. You must allow the possibility that peace can last longer than your fear expects. You must allow the possibility that you can become someone who no longer arranges life around pain. This does not mean you become careless. Buddhist wisdom is not blind optimism. It does not tell you to trust everyone. It tells you to see clearly. Seeing clearly means you do not use the past to paint every face with the same color. It means you allow reality to show itself before your wound writes the ending. It means you can protect yourself without imprisoning yourself. It means you can remember what happened without living as if it is always happening. Pain-based identity keeps the past alive by making it present in every moment. The old wound says, "Because I was left, I will be left again. Because I was hurt, I will be hurt again. Because someone failed to choose me, I am unchosen." But the past is not happening right now unless the mind brings it into now and bows to it as truth. The present moment may contain different conditions, a different person, a different choice, a different level of awareness, a different you. Healing means giving the present permission to be more than a shadow of the past. This is why the breath is so important in Buddhist practice. The breath brings you back from the story into the body. It says, here, now, this moment. When pain has become identity, the mind lives in old meanings. But the breath does not carry those meanings unless thought attaches them. Breathing reminds you that before the story, there is life. Before the identity, there is awareness. Before the wound says its name, there is a quiet presence that has never been fully broken. You may not feel that presence strongly at first. It may be covered by years of fear, anger, grief, longing, and self-protection. But it is there. You touch it each time you pause instead of react. Each time you observe instead of obey. Each time you choose peace over the familiar performance of pain. Slowly, the identity begins to loosen. You stop saying, "I am broken," and begin to say, "I am healing from something painful." You stop saying, "This is who I am," and begin to say, "This is what I learned, and I can learn differently." Language matters because language repeats identity. The words you use about yourself become small seeds in the mind. If you keep saying, "I always ruin things," the mind looks for proof. If you keep saying, "No one stays," the mind prepares for abandonment even when love is present. If you keep saying, "I cannot let go," the mind treats attachment like a prison with no door. But when you speak with awareness, the inner world begins to change. You can say, "Letting go is hard, but I am practicing." You can say, "My fear is loud, but it is not the only voice." You can say, "I have known pain, but pain is not my name." This is not pretending, it is retraining. The Buddha's teaching on impermanence can loosen pain-based identity because it reminds you that no state is fixed. The sadness you feel is not permanent. The fear you carry is not permanent. The identity created by old wounds is not permanent. Even the version of you that believes it cannot change is changing from moment to moment. If everything is changing, then suffering cannot honestly say, "I am forever." It can only say, "I am here now." And what is here now can pass. But impermanence must be lived, not only understood. You live it by noticing small changes. The urge is strong, then it softens. The memory appears, then it fades. The sadness rises, then it shifts. The old thought comes, but you do not follow it as far as before. These small changes prove that the identity is not solid. They show you that what felt like a permanent self may actually be a pattern moving through awareness. This gives hope, but not the noisy kind of hope that depends on someone else changing. It gives quiet hope. The hope that your inner life can be reshaped. The hope that your nervous system can learn calm. The hope that your heart can stop treating pain as home. The hope that your future can be built from wisdom, not repetition. Still, there will be days when the old identity returns strongly. A small rejection may awaken old abandonment. A quiet moment may awaken old loneliness. A mistake may awaken old shame. Someone's distance may awaken the belief that you are not worth staying for. On those days, do not say, "I am back at the beginning." You are not. You are meeting an old pattern with new awareness. That is progress. The wound may be old, but the way you respond can be new. This is where patience becomes a spiritual practice. The mind that was trained by repetition will not become free through impatience. It needs steady care. It needs repeated truth. It needs repeated boundaries. It needs repeated returns to the present. It needs repeated acts of self-respect. It needs you to keep choosing differently until the new way becomes less frightening. And one day, it will. One day, you will notice that the old pain no longer defines the first thought you have about yourself. You will notice that someone's silence does not immediately make you question your worth. You will notice that a memory can pass through without pulling you back into the whole story. You will notice that you can feel sadness without becoming the sad identity. You will notice that you can miss someone without calling the missing a command. You will notice that peace no longer feels like a stranger. This is how pain loses its name inside you. Not because you forget everything, but because you stop calling it me. The memory remains, but the identity changes. The scar remains, but it no longer writes your decisions. The lesson remains, but the suffering no longer sits on the throne. You become someone who can say, "That shaped me, but it does not own me." There is deep freedom in that sentence, because when pain becomes identity, every choice is made from the wound. You choose from fear. You love from fear. You leave from fear. You stay from fear. You speak from fear. You hide from fear. But when awareness becomes stronger than identity, you begin to choose from clarity. You can ask, what protects my peace? What honors my growth? What is true now? What would I choose if I did not believe I was only my wound? These questions open a new life. The old repetition may still call sometimes. It may invite you back into the familiar role. It may say, be the one who waits again. Be the one who suffers quietly again. Be the one who proves love through pain again. Be the one who expects nothing again. But you do not have to accept the role. You can bow to the old self with compassion and say, "Thank you for surviving, but I am not living there anymore." This is not rejection of your past. It is release from being limited by it. You are not throwing away the version of you that suffered. You are carrying that version into safety. You are saying, you did not deserve what happened, and you do not have to keep becoming it. That is a holy kind of kindness. It is the moment healing stops being an idea and becomes a relationship with yourself. Repetition turned pain into identity by making suffering familiar. Now repetition can turn wisdom into a new home. Each mindful breath repeats freedom. Each honest boundary repeats self-respect. Each refusal to return repeats healing. Each moment of compassion repeats safety. Each time you choose not to believe the old story, you weaken its roots. And slowly, the mind learns another truth. I am not the pain I repeated. I am the awareness that can stop repeating it. This is where the path becomes beautiful. You realize you do not need to destroy the old identity with force. You only need to stop feeding it as the final truth. You stop giving it every decision. You stop letting it choose your relationships. You stop letting it define what you deserve. You stop letting it turn every new moment into proof of old suffering. You let it fade by no longer living as if it is the whole of you. And when you do that, life begins to feel wider. You are no longer only the person who was hurt. You are also the person who noticed, the person who learned, the person who paused, the person who chose differently, the person who returned to breath, the person who stopped building a home out of what once broke them, the person who allowed peace to become familiar one small act at a time. So if repeated pain has made you believe you are broken, difficult, unwanted, unlucky, or destined to suffer, look again. Those may not be truths. They may be echoes. They may be the voice of repetition. They may be old experiences trying to become your name. But you are allowed to refuse the name suffering gave you. You are allowed to outgrow the identity pain wrote in your mind. You are allowed to become unfamiliar to your wound. At first, that may feel strange. You may not recognize yourself when you stop chasing, stop shrinking, stop expecting harm, stop reopening old doors, and stop calling chaos love. But that strange feeling is not loss. It is the beginning of freedom. It is the old identity losing its grip. It is your life making room for a self that is not built around injury. And this is the quiet miracle Buddhist wisdom points toward. The self you thought was fixed was never fixed. The pain you thought was permanent was moving. The identity you thought was you was only a pattern, and patterns can be seen, softened, and released. You do not have to keep becoming the wound just because you repeated it for years. You can repeat awareness now. You can repeat peace now. You can repeat self-respect now. You can repeat freedom until freedom becomes the place your mind returns to naturally. That is how the cycle begins to end, not through one dramatic escape, but through the steady refusal to keep calling pain your identity. The wound may have shaped a chapter, but it does not get to name the whole book. And when you finally see that the wound does not get to name the whole book, another hidden layer opens beneath the mind. Because it is not only your thoughts that return to what broke you. It is not only memory, ego, attachment, or identity. Sometimes your whole body has learned the old pain so deeply that familiar suffering feels safer than freedom it has not yet experienced. This is where healing becomes more than a decision. This is where the nervous system must learn what the heart is only beginning to understand. There is something painful about wanting freedom and still feeling pulled toward what hurt you. You can know the old pattern is not good for you. You can name it clearly. You can tell yourself, I am done. Yet when silence comes, when loneliness rises, when uncertainty touches your chest, something inside you reaches backward. Not because you are weak, not because you enjoy suffering, not because you do not understand the lesson, but because the nervous system often chooses what it knows before it chooses what is good. The body has its own memory. It remembers more than words. It remembers how waiting felt. It remembers the tightness in your stomach. It remembers the sudden relief when attention returned. It remembers the fear of silence. It remembers the rush of being chosen after feeling ignored. It remembers the rhythm of pain and comfort, distance and closeness, hope and disappointment. Over time, that rhythm can become familiar enough that your body begins to treat it as normal. And what the body calls normal, the mind may later call love, destiny, chemistry, or unfinished business. This is why freedom can feel strange at first. Freedom does not always arrive like a soft song. Sometimes it arrives like an empty room after years of noise. You asked for peace, but when peace comes, your body does not immediately know how to rest inside it. It may search for the old alarm. It may look for a problem. It may create worry where there is none. It may miss the emotional storm, not because the storm was good, but because the storm was familiar. The nervous system is not asking, what will make me happy? It is asking, what have I survived before? That question explains why familiar suffering can feel safer than unknown freedom. The body trusts what it has survived. Even if it was painful, it has proof that you made it through. You survived that confusion before. You survived that waiting before. You survived that emotional hunger before. You survived that disappointment before. But freedom is unknown. Peace is unknown. Stability is unknown. Being loved without chasing is unknown. Resting without fear is unknown. And to a nervous system trained by chaos, the unknown can feel like danger. Buddhist wisdom teaches that suffering continues through ignorance, craving, and clinging. But when we look carefully, we see that these are not only ideas in the mind, they are also felt in the body. Craving can feel like heat in the chest. Clinging can feel like tightness in the throat. Fear can feel like a stone in the stomach. Attachment can feel like a physical pull toward the person or pattern that harmed you. This is why you cannot always think your way out of suffering. The body must be included in the path. A thought may say, do not go back, but the body may say, go back. At least we know what happens there. A wise part of you may say, this person or pattern steals my peace. But the nervous system may reply, peace feels too quiet. I do not trust it yet. This inner conflict can make you feel divided. One part of you is walking toward freedom. Another part is still standing at the old door, listening for a familiar voice. This does not mean healing is impossible. It means healing must be gentle and repeated. The nervous system learns through experience. If it learned suffering through repetition, it must learn safety through repetition too. One peaceful day may not convince it. One healthy choice may not calm it forever. One moment of clarity may not erase years of emotional training. But each time you choose not to return, each time you breathe through the urge, each time you let peace stay without running from it, the body receives a new message. It begins to learn, maybe we can survive freedom too. That sentence matters. Because for many wounded people, freedom does not feel like release at first. It feels like exposure. When you are no longer attached to the old suffering, you may not know where to place your attention. You may not know who to be without the emotional problem. You may feel open, unguarded, and unsure. The body may confuse this openness with danger. It may say, "We are not protected. We need the old pattern back." But the old pattern was not protection. It was only familiarity. The nervous system prefers familiar suffering because it has learned to predict it. Prediction gives the body a false sense of safety. If you know someone will disappoint you, you can brace for it. If you know love will be inconsistent, you can prepare for the distance. If you know a relationship will make you anxious, you can stay alert. This alertness may exhaust you, but it gives the body a job. Freedom removes that job. It says, you do not need to brace now. But after years of bracing, the body may not know how to soften. This is why calm can feel uncomfortable. The body that has lived in emotional emergency may not experience calm as peace. It may experience calm as suspense. It waits for the next problem. It listens for the next shift. It scans for the next rejection. It studies every quiet moment like danger is hiding inside it. You may sit in a peaceful space and still feel restless because your body is not reacting to the present. It is reacting to the past that taught it not to trust ease. Buddhist mindfulness helps by bringing you back to what is actually happening now. Not what happened before, not what might happen later. Now. The breath is now. The body is now. The floor beneath you is now. The present moment may be simple, but simplicity is powerful for a nervous system addicted to complexity. When you return to the breath, you are teaching the body that safety is not always found by solving, chasing, or predicting. Sometimes safety begins by staying with what is here. But this practice can be difficult because familiar suffering often has a strong emotional charge. The old pattern may make you feel alive in a painful way. The waiting, the uncertainty, the longing, the relief, the fear, the hope, all of it can create intensity. That intensity can be mistaken for meaning. When freedom arrives without intensity, the nervous system may think something is missing. It may say, "This is too calm, this cannot be real." But what is missing may be the old distress. What is missing may be the pressure that used to keep your body alert. Unknown. Freedom may feel empty because it is not filled with fear. It may feel quiet because it is not demanding constant emotional labor. It may feel strange because it is not asking you to prove your worth every hour. But strangeness is not danger. Sometimes strangeness is simply the body meeting a life it has never practiced. This is why you must not judge yourself for feeling uncomfortable when things become better. Many people shame themselves at this stage. They say, "Why am I not happy? Why do I miss the old pain? Why do I feel restless without chaos?" But shame only makes the body feel more unsafe. Instead, you can say, "My system learned old suffering as normal. Now it is learning peace." This shifts the whole experience. You stop treating discomfort as failure and begin seeing it as reconditioning. The body is not betraying you when it reaches for familiar suffering. It is trying to protect you with outdated information. It is using an old map for a new road. It learned that certain patterns were survivable, so it pulls you toward them. But survivable is not the same as safe. A cage can be survivable. A storm can be survivable. A painful relationship can be survivable. A life of emotional shrinking can be survivable. But you were not born only to survive. Freedom asks the nervous system to trust something it cannot yet predict. This is why it feels risky. You do not know how peace will unfold. You do not know who you will become without the wound at the center. You do not know what life will feel like when you are not measuring your worth through someone else's response. You do not know what your days will be like without checking, waiting, proving, defending, or returning. The unknown can feel wide and frightening, but it is also where new life begins. Buddhist wisdom speaks of the middle way, and this matters here. Healing the nervous system does not mean forcing yourself into freedom with violence. It does not mean yelling at yourself, "Move on already." It does not mean pretending you feel safe when you do not. It means walking gently between awareness and courage. You acknowledge the fear, but you do not make fear your master. You honor the body's memory, but you do not let old memory decide the future. You move slowly, but you keep moving. The nervous system learns safety through felt proof, not through arguments. You cannot simply tell the body, "We are free now," and expect it to believe you immediately. You show it. You show it by not opening the old door when the urge rises. You show it by choosing rest instead of rumination. You show it by spending time with people who do not require you to disappear. You show it by keeping promises to yourself. You show it by letting calm moments last without creating a problem to feel normal again. Each act becomes evidence. The body begins collecting new proof. I felt lonely, and I did not return to what harmed me. I felt anxious, and I survived without chasing relief. I felt quiet, and nothing terrible happened. I set a boundary, and I did not disappear. I chose peace, and I was still alive. This is how unknown freedom slowly becomes known. It becomes known through repeated experiences of not being destroyed by peace. One of the reasons familiar suffering is so powerful is that it offers immediate relief. When the urge to return is strong, going back can quiet the body quickly. Sending the message, checking the person, reopening the memory, revisiting the old habit, all of it may give a short breath of relief. The nervous system says, "Good, we found the familiar thing." But that relief is not healing. It is only the temporary calming of a craving. Soon the same anxiety returns, often stronger because the pattern has been fed again. This is where wisdom must become stronger than relief. Relief asks, what will make this discomfort stop right now? Wisdom asks, what will stop this suffering from repeating? These are different questions. Familiar suffering often answers the first question. Freedom answers the second. The first gives a quick calm that fades. The second gives a deeper peace that takes time. If you only follow immediate relief, you may keep strengthening the very pattern you want to escape. Buddhist practice teaches patience because liberation does not always feel pleasant at the beginning. Sometimes the first taste of freedom is withdrawal from old suffering. The body misses the pattern. The mind misses the story. The ego misses the role. The heart misses the hope. But missing does not mean you should return. Missing means the old bond still has energy. If you stay present, that energy begins to change. It rises, peaks, softens, and passes. Each time it passes without being obeyed, the chain weakens. This is the deep practice, feeling the pull without becoming the pull. You can feel the body lean backward and still keep your feet on the path. You can feel the ache and still breathe. You can feel the fear of freedom and still choose one free action. You can feel the old suffering call your name and still answer yourself instead. This is how awareness enters the body, not by removing all discomfort, but by helping you remain present inside discomfort without surrendering your future to it. The nervous system also chooses familiar suffering because the unknown requires trust. Not trust in another person only, but trust in life, trust in your own strength, trust in your ability to handle what comes next. If the past taught you that trust leads to pain, your body may treat trust like danger. So even when freedom appears, you may look for reasons to doubt it. You may expect hidden harm. You may question every good thing. You may feel safer with pain, because at least pain confirms what you already believe about life. This is why the healing path must include rebuilding trust with yourself. Before you can trust freedom, you must know that you will not abandon yourself inside it. You must know that if loneliness comes, you will not hand yourself back to harm. If sadness comes, you will not call it failure. If uncertainty comes, you will not trade your peace for a familiar wound. The body begins to trust freedom when it sees that you are becoming a safe place for yourself. Being safe for yourself means you do not mock your own needs. You do not ignore your own discomfort. You do not force yourself to stay where your body keeps whispering, "This hurts." You do not give away your peace just to avoid another person's disappointment. You do not turn every lonely night into a reason to reopen old suffering. You protect your inner life the way you once wished someone else would protect it. This is not selfish. It is necessary. The nervous system calms when it knows someone is listening from within. Many people are anxious because they have repeatedly ignored themselves. Their body gave signals, but they explained them away. Their heart felt uneasy, but they silenced it. Their spirit felt drained, but they called it loyalty. After a while, the body stops trusting the self. It thinks, "When I warn you, you do not listen." Healing begins when you start listening again. The body may say, "This conversation makes me shrink." Listen. It may say, "This person's closeness comes with fear." Listen. It may say, "This pattern leaves me exhausted." Listen. It may say, "This peace feels unfamiliar but not harmful." Listen even more carefully. Part of healing is learning the difference between the discomfort of danger and the discomfort of growth. Familiar suffering often feels painful, but known. Unknown. Freedom often feels uncomfortable but spacious. One shrinks you, the other stretches you. This distinction is important. Not all discomfort means something is wrong. Sometimes discomfort means your system is learning a new normal. The discomfort of danger usually comes with self-betrayal, confusion, fear, and shrinking. The discomfort of growth comes with uncertainty, tenderness, openness, and space. You may feel nervous, but you are not losing yourself. You may feel strange, but your dignity remains. You may feel exposed, but your spirit is not being crushed. Learning this difference helps the nervous system stop running back to what it has already survived. Buddhist wisdom teaches that the mind creates suffering by clinging to what cannot give lasting peace. The nervous system adds another layer. It clings to what has been practiced. If you practiced fear for years, fear becomes easy. If you practiced self-abandonment for years, self-abandonment becomes quick. If you practiced waiting for inconsistent love, waiting becomes familiar. This is not destiny, it is training. And training can change. You change it by practicing a new response when the old cue appears. When silence once meant panic, you practice breathing. When loneliness once meant returning, you practice staying. When memory once meant romanticizing, you practice seeing the whole truth. When fear once meant closing your heart, you practice grounding in the present. When craving once meant obeying, you practice observing. This is not easy, but it is how the body learns freedom. And there will be resistance. The old nervous system may protest. It may make the old suffering look sweeter than it was. It may make freedom look colder than it is. It may say, "At least we knew how to survive there." But you can answer with compassion, "Yes, we survived there, but we are learning to live now." This simple inner response carries both truth and tenderness. It does not shame the body for its fear. It guides it towards something better. Freedom becomes less unknown each time you experience it without running. At first, it may feel like standing at the edge of a forest with no map. Then, slowly, you take one step, then another. You learn the sound of your own breath. You learn that quiet does not always hide danger. You learn that the absence of emotional chaos can become restful. You learn that you can make choices without being controlled by the past. You learn that life beyond the old wound has texture, meaning, and warmth. This is where Buddhist practice of non-clinging becomes deeply practical. Non-clinging does not mean you never feel desire. It means desire no longer drags your whole being behind it. Non-clinging does not mean you never miss the past. It means missing does not become a chain. Non-clinging does not mean you never feel fear. It means fear is allowed to rise and pass without being crowned as truth. The nervous system begins to relax when it learns that feelings can move through without becoming orders. A feeling is not a command. A body memory is not a prophecy. A familiar pull is not a sacred sign. A craving is not destiny. This is how you begin to separate old conditioning from present wisdom. The more clearly you see this, the less power familiar suffering has. It may still call, but it no longer sounds like home. It sounds like an old pattern asking to be repeated. And now you know repetition is a choice, not a prison. The body also needs tenderness during this process. You cannot force a frightened nervous system into peace by being cruel to yourself. You must become patient with the parts of you that still tremble. You must speak inwardly with care. You must allow rest. You must create small rituals of safety, a calm morning, a slow breath, a clean space, a walk, a hand on the chest, a moment of stillness before reacting, a decision to sleep instead of spiraling. These simple acts may look ordinary, but to the nervous system, they are new teachings. They say, life can be steady. They say, we can be here without rushing. They say, we do not have to chase pain to feel alive. They say, the present moment can hold us. Over time, these small messages become stronger than the old alarm. They build a new inner home. This is why unknown freedom eventually becomes familiar freedom. The body that once chose suffering can learn to choose peace. The mind that once expected chaos can learn to trust quiet. The heart that once confused anxiety with love can learn to recognize gentleness. The ego that once defended the wound can learn to protect the healing. Nothing about this is instant, but everything about it is possible. And as this change happens, you may begin to feel grief, not only for what hurt you, but for how long your body thought suffering was safety. You may feel sadness for the years spent bracing, the relationships where you disappeared, the moments when peace was available, but you did not know how to receive it. Let that grief come softly. It is not there to punish you. It is there because you are finally seeing clearly, and clear seeing often releases tears that confusion kept locked away. Do not turn that grief into another identity. Let it move. Let it cleanse. Let it teach you tenderness for the person you were, the one who went back, the one who stayed too long, the one who mistook familiar pain for shelter, the one who did not yet know that freedom could feel frightening and still be right. That version of you does not need hatred. That version needs your understanding, because every return to old suffering was an attempt to feel safe in the only way your system knew. Now you know more. Now you can teach yourself differently. Now you can become the proof your body needs. You can show yourself that peace will not destroy you. You can show yourself that freedom may be unknown, but it is not empty. You can show yourself that a calm life is still a deep life. You can show yourself that love does not need to come with panic to be real. This is the turning point. The nervous system may choose familiar suffering at first, but awareness can interrupt the choice. Compassion can soften the fear. Repetition can build new pathways. Wisdom can guide the body out of the old cage. And one day, the place that once felt safe because you knew how to suffer there will feel too small for the person you have become. That is when unknown freedom starts becoming your natural direction. Not because fear never speaks, but because fear no longer leads. Not because the old pain disappears completely, but because your body no longer bows to it as home. Not because healing is always comfortable, but because you have learned that comfort is not the same as truth. You can be uncomfortable and still be free. You can be uncertain and still be safe. You can miss the familiar and still choose the path that honors your peace. So when your nervous system pulls you toward what once broke you, pause before obeying. Place one hand on your heart if you need to. Breathe slowly. Tell the body, I know this feels familiar, but familiar is not the same as safe. I know freedom feels unknown, but unknown is not the same as danger. Let those words sink beneath the mind. Let them reach the places where old fear has been living. Let them become a new teaching. This is how the body begins to awaken, not through force, but through repeated moments of safety. Not through shame, but through patient awareness. Not through running back, but through staying present when the old road calls. The nervous system can learn that peace is not a threat. It can learn that stillness is not emptiness. It can learn that love does not have to feel like survival. It can learn that your life can be guided by wisdom, not by old alarms. And as it learns, you become less divided. The mind, heart, body, and spirit begin moving in the same direction, not back to the wound, not back to the familiar suffering, not back to the story that kept you small, but forward, into a freedom that may once have felt unknown, yet slowly becomes the safest place you have ever lived. You kept going back, not because you were weak, but because the wound knew your name. Familiar pain can feel like shelter when peace has not yet become your home. The wounded mind mistakes old suffering for safety. The ego defends what it knows how to survive. The nervous system runs back to the storm because the silence of freedom feels too new. And attachment can make the person or place that broke you look like the only place where you can be repaired. But Buddhist wisdom asks you to see clearly, not with anger, not with shame, not with hatred for your past, just with honest eyes. What feels familiar is not always safe. What feels intense is not always love. What you miss is not always meant to return. Sometimes the door you keep reopening is not a doorway to healing. It is the entrance back into a version of you that had to shrink, wait, beg, explain, and survive. So let this be the moment you stop calling pain your home. Let this be the moment you understand that peace may feel unfamiliar at first, but that does not mean it is wrong. It means your soul is learning a new language. You can miss the pattern and still not obey it. You can remember the past and still walk forward. You can forgive without returning. You can leave without hatred, drama, or regret. If this message touched something in you, write in the comments, I choose peace. Let that be your quiet promise to yourself that familiar pain will no longer be your guide. And if you want more Buddhist wisdom to help you heal, let go and return to yourself. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Your next moment of peace may begin with the next lesson.